Welcome to the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus 2021 Minority Business Forecast, bringing together South Carolina lawmakers and the state's most prominent professionals and minority business leaders discussing topics and issues vital to competitiveness and overall success. Post, share, and tag someone you know that needs information, resources, and advice because this is a conversation you won't want to miss. But first, please welcome SCLBC Chair, Representative Patricia M. Hennigan.
Good morning and welcome to the 2021 South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus Minority Business Forecast. This is a new effort by the caucus, but one that we hope will become an annual event. The state of minority small business is very important to members of the caucus and me. This event is designed to bring together South Carolina lawmakers with the state's most prominent minority business leaders for a frank discussion of issues vital to South Carolina minority business competitiveness and overall production. This event will also link DBEs and minority businesses with state agencies and departments with independent contractual opportunities. We have assembled a knowledgeable and exciting group of panel and panelists, all given the charge by me to help South Carolina minority businesses start, expand, and achieve success. I hope you enjoy the forecast. And please remember, you can always call on me and the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus to be on the front lines fighting for you. I welcome you to the 2021 Minority Business Forecast.
Carolina lawmakers and the state's most prominent professionals and minority business leaders covering topics and issues vital to competitiveness and overall success. Please tag, post, and share this informative conversation filled with important information, valuable advice, and key resources. The first panel, the Hbcu Roundtable with Representative Annie McDaniel. The former Fairfield County School Board Chair was elected to the South Carolina House of Representatives in 2028, representing District 41. It covers Chesterfield, Fairfield, and Richland counties. Representative McDaniel currently serves on the Education and Public Works Committee and the Operations and Management Committee in the House of Representatives. Allen University President Dr. Ernest McNeely. Prior to becoming the 30th president of Allen University, Dr. McNeely was the principal officer in the McNeely Group, an Atlanta-based consulting firm specializing in accreditation, planning, financial modeling, and NCAA compliance. Claflin University President Dr. Dwan Warmack. He is the 9th president of Claflin University. Prior to his appointment, he served as president of Harris Stowe State University for 5 years and has more than 20 years of progressive administrative experience in higher education at 5 distinct institutions. Denmark Technical College President Dr. Willie Todd Jr. He currently serves as the 9th president at Denmark Tech. With an extensive record in higher education, Dr. Todd previously served as Executive Director for Student Affairs at Clark Atlanta University, VP for Academic Affairs at Wiley College, Vice Provost at Norfolk State University, and Adjunct Instructor at Georgia State University, and South Carolina State President James Clark. Prior to his tenure as the 12th President at State, Mr. Clark was the Vice President of a division at AT&T. He also worked with General Electric, Gillette, and Exxon International, and served 18 years as a trustee at Benedict College. Please welcome all of our panelists for this morning's session. Thank you again so much for joining us. We want to encourage you to please post and share and tag someone in this broadcast that you know is going to need this great information. We'll be sharing important resources and sage advice that you will want to know about. Again, thank you so much, panelists, for joining us this morning. We look forward to a great conversation. Let's start first with the presidents. We want to know, how significant is it for South Carolina HBCUs to have relationships with the business and corporate community? Dr. Warmack, let's start with you.
Thank you. And good morning, everyone. It is extremely significant for our HBCUs to have a relationship with the business community in South Carolina, but also too globally as well. And we think about our job as just not educating our outstanding scholars at our institution, but more importantly, is to get them gainfully employed. And so to have strategic partnerships with business that ensures that when students matriculate through our outstanding institutions, they're able to go on to major corporations and companies to do outstanding work, preferably in South Carolina, to keep our tax-based tax dollars here. And students I'll use Claflin University, the critical mass of our students, over 70% are from the state of South Carolina. So if we want to continue to attract and retain talent, the working relationship with business is essential. And so we've been very intentional about creating a relationship, cultivating partnerships that are mutually beneficial to ensure that we are preparing a diverse workforce for the state of South Carolina, but also to a talented workforce for the state of South Carolina.
Thank you. Mr. Clark, I want to go to you over at South Carolina State University. And you have an extensive background in the business community already. Were you able to pull from those relationships to be able to introduce your students and the campus to those important business relationships? He's muted. He's muted. You're muted, Mr. Clark.
Yep. Thank you very much again. Coming from the corporate world, I do have the opportunity to bring yet another perspective, but equally important. On the corporate side, when we looked at places where we'd be investing, one of the things that we looked at was the human capital. And so having a relationship with the universities there significantly enhanced an area. And because of my background, one of the things that we focused on initially, right from the very beginning, is we use the phrase transformation through collaboration and ABC, academic institutions, businesses, and the community of which we are part. And that business part, so we have to have partnerships and collaborations with those businesses because the product that we produce is for a particular customer set. The customer set for our product, those educated, significantly educated youth from our state primarily, are products that are taken up by corporations or other graduate schools. So they are, in one sense, our stakeholders, our customers of the products that we are producing. And so without those relationships, it makes it very, very difficult. The other part is with relationships with corporations, they can bring over time strategic investments in areas that are critical to both the institution and the corporations. So the matchup between one university and a corporation can become a very intimate relationship over a very long period of time. And as they see that working, they will begin investing over a long, long period of time.
Yeah, so you think that it's really important, not only from what you're saying, for to be a relationship, but that those businesses actually pursue, train, make sure those students matriculate from student to employee.
Absolutely. The businesses want the institutions to produce high quality, educated students that have education and knowledge base in their areas of interest. So from a business standpoint, it's not just altruistic, it's self-serving. It is business. So they will invest because they need that talent. Each year they need more talent, and they want talent that is directed to their particular areas. And we're the engines that can produce that talent. Now, as it turns out, corporations are becoming a lot more sensitive to diversifying their workforce, and we are the institutions that are producing that top talent. That as Dr. Womack said, implied is that oftentimes leave our state, and so what we have to do is have strong relationships with the corporations that are in our state to make sure that the talent is directed to help stay in the state, because that helps elevate the state itself. It helps elevate everyone.
Thank you. That's James Clark, South Carolina State University president. I want to get you in here, Dr. McNeely. What is your current relationship with the minority business owners and leaders in Columbia, South Carolina, where Allen University is really kind of smack dab in the middle of 5 Points, the Vista, kind of downtown Columbia area? He's muted.
Okay. Thank you for having me with you this morning. We have extensive relationships with the minority business community. We have been very busily building, repairing, expanding, and in the main, we have a preference for doing business with women-owned or minority businesses. And I think we have added significantly to the bottom line and the well-being of minority businesses in Columbia. And a bit further out, I might add, we have relationships in Sumter, for instance, and other areas. But it is a choice that we've made, and we benefited from that choice.
Mm-hmm. Over at Denmark Technical College, Dr. Willie Todd, is your relationship a little different with the business community because some of your curriculum, so to speak, has more practical, more hands-on professions?
So I wouldn't necessarily be able to say it's different because I would have to know all of theirs, but I would definitely say it's vitally important. Mm-hmm. For us, as you said, first of all, for us, many of our programs, we directly align our curriculum to industry standards. So because, as you know, as a two-year college, we're the only technical college, HBCU, in the state. So for us, it's vitally important that we're preparing our students to go, as everybody else, directly into the workforce. So we have a very close relationship with industry, especially minority industry in our community, but all industry, because we want to make sure that when they leave Denmark Technical College, they're not having to go and be retrained. And for us, we also offer training for businesses here. So many of them come here to get additional certifications. They come here to get their employees certified in different things. And so for us, that relationship is extremely important. I wouldn't say different than anybody else's, but definitely vital to our success, because our students have to be, when they leave here, we want them to go in and be able to walk in the door. So that's why our apprenticeships, internships, and things are very essential. If we didn't have them, I don't think we could be successful in doing what we do.
Are you getting the same or equal cooperation from those industries as these other presidents are saying they're getting?
So I would say yes and no. Part of our challenge here is that in rural South Carolina, and that's exactly where we are, industry is very limited. So we have a problem with proximity. And there's no Uber here, there's no Lyft here, there's no public transportation here. So we have the challenges, and especially in a pandemic and a COVID culture, even as we're finding ways to get our students to opportunity. And then we're also rebuilding relationships here at Denmark Technical College. I mean, we've had some negative press in the past for a variety of reasons. And so for us, what we're finding is that as we go to work with industry, their arms are open. We've reconnected with a lot of the industry, but for us, it's rebuilding relationship and repairing. I've been here as president for a year, and I came in January of last year. The pandemic hit in March. And at that point, the world changed for everybody. Yeah. So for us, we're finding that they're reaching out, but it's the lack of industry in our community. So we really need more industry brought to rural South Carolina.
Yeah, we are going to talk a little bit more about the pandemic in just a minute, but I want to get you in here, Representative McDaniel. What can legislators do? What can you guys do up at the State House to help these colleges and universities? Dr. Todd said he needs some industry in his rural community so that the students can be trained to go out in the world. What can you do from a legislative standpoint to help these guys and their schools?
First of all, thank you, Trey, for having me here today. And I just want to say congratulations to all these fine African-American gentlemen who are leading our historically Black colleges and universities. Absolutely. And ask that you guys keep up the great work. I think what we can do legislatively is first have a conversation with you guys and give us more specifics about what you need. In the meantime, I think we can maybe introduce legislation that better ties the Department of Commerce hand, so that when they are seeking industries to come into South Carolina, they will look at your areas. I know, like down in Denmark, where the area is so beautiful and flat, Polo could probably be a good sport that we could bring in. So I think it's just a matter of us working with the Department of Commerce and letting them know how serious we are about making sure that our institutions receive what they need. And I think it's also important that as industries come in, they let you all know what skills they're looking for in our students so that you can prepare them from freshmen on. So when they graduate, they will be ready to go into the workforce for the businesses that come in.
We are, okay, I'm going to come to you in just a minute, Mr. Clark. You're watching the 2021 Minority Business Forecast from the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus. My name is Trey Taylor. We're here with the HBCU Roundtable, Representative Annie McDaniel, District 41, Allen University President Dr. Ernest McNeely, Claflin University President Dwan Warmack, and Denmark Technical College President Dr. Willie Todd. South Carolina State President James Clark is also with us. You had a question, Mr. Clark?
To add something that was complementary to what the representative was just saying. I was having a conversation just the other day with someone, and one of the points that I made was about industry, and it was about the Orangeburg area, quite frankly. And I said, one of the things that as a corporate person, one of the things that we have an opportunity to do is realize that Claflin and SC State form what I call, or within what I call the academic triangle. It's bounded by 3 streets. That powerhouse of those 2 universities represent an intellectual capacity that we need to tap into. So when corporations are being sought, you really need to have a deep engagement with the universities, because that's where the talent pool resides. And we can bring a notion of not only what we are doing not right now, but what we can do in the future. And if you just reach out a little further down the road there, my good friend, Dr. Todd, we can wrap them in. So in an area, so when the legislators are looking at a region, and I call it like the greater Orangeburg region, if you start the discussion with the academic institutions before you get into negotiations, I think you can have a much more powerful offering that we can help you bring to the table.
Yeah, that's James Clark, president of South Carolina State University. Dr. McNeely, I see that you put in the private chat that you feel like there's an obligation for businesses to seek relationships with and support HBCUs. Do you want to expound on that?
Well, indeed. All of our human endeavors occur within a context. And to the extent that one builds and strengthens a community, then their own interests are served. If one were to venture back into the early days of capitalism, there was a clear understanding that capitalists had an obligation to make it possible for even more people to participate. So the Hershey's, and no matter what one might think of Henry Ford, he had the right idea in terms of pricing his products so that people who worked for him could buy them. Mm-hmm. And that this notion that for capitalism to be perpetually successful, to grow, to expand, it has an obligation to create the customers. And certainly our institutions are first and foremost expanders of the American economy and the American democracy. And to the extent that businesses have the capacity to help shape that output, then there is an affirmative obligation on their part.
That's Dr. Ernest McNeely, president of Allen University. Representative McDaniel, I wanted to ask, are there current efforts to tie our major industries with our HBCUs? You're on mute.
We just start talking. not that I'm currently aware of, but that's a good point. So I will make sure that that's something I look into, and possibly, guys, if we get together, maybe we can introduce some legislation that could put that in place. I would definitely welcome that. And I think that's something that we as the Legislative Black Caucus could champion for you all. But I also want to be reminded, Dr. McNeely, when you talked about the relationship with the businesses and them coming and approaching maybe the HBCUs, but let us be reminded, if you look at the legislation that we've been passing this year, it has nothing to do with the quality of life and economics of the state of South Carolina. And I won't go through what they all are, but you guys know what they are. So I think sometimes when things are not working the way they should, in order for us to reach the goals that we want to reach, as I think it was my sister Shirley Chisholm stated, if you don't have a seat at the table, then you bring your folding chair and you sit there. So if they're not doing what we think they ought to be doing, then we have to figure out how to maneuver our way in there to make it happen.
Right. Well, it definitely sounds like there needs to be a meeting after everybody gets their vaccine, or at least a Zoom call until that all happens, because it is so important for our HBCUs to have a relationship with your representative, with your state representative, so that you can get what you need for the students. Sometimes they don't know what you need until there is communication. Do you feel, Representative McDaniel, and you can only speak for yourself, that there is adequate communication? Do you know what the HBCUs need in South Carolina?
Absolutely not. And that's why we need to have that conversation so that we can work with the HBCUs to provide what they need. I was in one of my education subcommittee, and we were looking at the symptoms of a problem. And I'll tell you, because it impacts the higher ed institutions, that a lot of our students are losing their life scholarships in their first year. So we're adding math and English in the 12th grade, regardless of whether the student needs it or not. My response was, is that really the problem? Are we diagnosing the problem, or are we just dealing with the symptoms? And the response was, well, that's another tool in the toolkit. Well, you know, sometimes that toolkit can get so heavy that you can't even carry it. So we need to deal with the actual problems. So we need to come to you all, and we need to have that conversation about what is needed, because a lot of our students truly do not know, and they don't know what they don't know. So we have to try to help them. So no, ma'am, that conversation needs to happen. And this has really inspired me. This has really inspired me to push the Black Caucus to make sure that we start making sure it happens.
Absolutely. Dr. Todd, Dr. Wormack, do you feel comfortable going to your legislators and saying, hey, I need ... I'll
go in the order you called our name. So I'll say yes, I feel extremely comfortable. The legislators in our region, we have at least a monthly meeting, and most of them, all of them, I have their telephone numbers. I can pick up the phone and call them. They pick up the phone and call me, and they tell me all the time consistently, if you need something, let us know. The biggest challenge for me is not about being able to reach out to them. It's about here at Denmark Tech, years of systemic racism and underfunding and a lot of other things that now we're trying to combat to move this college forward. But an excellent relationship with the legislative representatives for our area.
What about you, Mr. Wormack? Do you need more? Do you get more? Do you get what you need?
Yes, I do. And I think the difference is, I think you have two public state-funded institutions that are HBCUs, Denmark Tech and South Carolina State. The other 6 of us are private. And so our interactions or direct working relationship with the legislators is a little different, right? Those are on some intentional projects or strategic directions that are happening. But I want to definitely pivot back to President Clark's statement about being intentional, right? There are no way you're going to bring business to the upstate without reaching out to Clemson. You won't bring business to Columbia without reaching out to USC. We have just as much or better the brain power or brain thrust to really generate economic wealth and workforce development in our communities, but it's a second hand, it's an afterthought. But every industry look for those 3 elements: the education, right? How is the K through 12 system? What is the workforce opportunities that are there to fulfill their workforce, and the intellectual capability? And we had that. But as President Clark said, sometimes we miss it. And so I just think about being intentional on the front end and including these outstanding institutions that's been around for a very long time. Claflin University, 151 years in this community. It's not happenstance, right? And top in the country, but it has to be embraced and celebrated as well.
Well, Dwayne Wormack, you just opened up a big old can of Black Students Matter worms there. So are you saying that you all are being looked over because of the melanin in the students' skin? Black melanin matters. Black students matter, Mr. Clark.
I think, let me make my first comment, and then I come to your question. You hear the phrase all the time, workforce development. no matter what corporation is being talked to, no matter what corporation we're considering, you talk about workforce development. Now, one of the things that we speak a little bit more about that with our technical college system in the state of South Carolina, the overall technical college system. So you hear that tied in. But from a corporation's standpoint, workforce development, just those two words, are critically important. So as Dr. Wormack was saying, no matter where you go, if you're in that region, if you need to say workforce development, and you'll draw a circle around the region and say, what are my assets in this area that I can apply to workforce development? Now, I think that part of the problem is historically, the state has focused its so much of its energy on the three major institutions, the three research institutions, MUSC, USC, and Clemson.
Yeah.
And to that extent, the comprehensives, as we refer to, or in a public school context, are not considered in the same way. And then if you're not considering the comprehensives in the same way, the HBCUs are going to get even less, consideration in the thought process. And so the thought process of those that are working on development has to just stop and say, draw the circle. What are the assets in this region to help me with workforce development? And if you have any kind of college, technical college, university there, if they're not at the table, then you're missing the boat.
Yeah, absolutely. That is James Clark. He's the president of South Carolina State University. Representative McDaniel, you had your hand up. Did you have something that you wanted to add? Oh, you were just saying hallelujah.
My hair out the way.
Okay. All right. Dr. Todd, I wanted to piggyback on something you said. You mentioned that your delegation's leadership, but what about the Speaker of the House, Lucas, Senate President Peel, or Senator Hugh Leatherman? How are those relationships?
So those relationships for me don't exist at the highest level, but I can't place that on them totally. I think it's important that we also reach out. I mean, I think many of us fall into a habit of reaching out to those who oftentimes assist us. So the Congressional Black Caucus is always a friend of Denmark Technical College, but also there are other representatives in our area. So for me, as part of a technical college system, there are certain things that we're one of 16 schools. So there are certain things that our system works through, and the presidents all work collectively together, the 16 of us, and then our leadership will go at. But of course, there are certain things distinctly unique for Denmark Technical College. We're the only HBCU of the 16, and we're the only one that we own residential housing. So that means that a lot of our students, even though the overwhelming majority are from South Carolina, a lot of them are not from South Carolina as well. And so we have unique things. So I would say that those relationships could be strengthened, but I would say it's on both sides. Them reaching out, but also us reaching out more as well.
I want to thank everyone for joining us for the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus 2021 Minority Business Forecast. We are in the HBCU Roundtable. Representative Annie McDaniel, District 41, Chesterfield, Fairfield, and Richland counties joins us. Allen University President Dr. Ernest McNeely is next to her. And then South Carolina State President James Clark is next to him. Going up, we've got Dwayne Wormack, Claflin University President. We just heard from Dr. Willie Todd, Denmark Technical College President. Want to continue to ask you to post and share this information out. This is great information, and we hope that you are getting what you need. We really want to talk a little bit, gentlemen and ladies, about your relationships with minority contractors working with your schools. Are there opportunities also for small businesses? You talked a little bit about some of the major corporations. Dr. McNeely, if you can unmute your mic, please.
Yes. Well, certainly, as I suggested earlier, we have been doing a great deal of renovation, refurbishing, generally sprucing up, if you will, the physical plant. And we have decided to deal almost solely with women and minority businesses, and large firms only when they have a minority partner. It has served us well. We've not had to make any concessions. And we believe that, as I suggested earlier, As the larger environment improves, then we're all better for it. And so I think there are opportunities for HBCUs and businesses, generally speaking, to reach out to women-owned and minority businesses.
We've got about 10 minutes left, and I want to talk a little bit about the pandemic. How has the pandemic impacted your institutions and your relationships with the business and corporate community, and what can be done to improve that? Mr. Clark, would you like to chime in?
Sure. It has been, the pandemic has been disruptive. It has been
to say the least, I'm sure.
To everyone. And it's required a deepening of relationships with suppliers and contractors. And I'll use a couple of things as that we dealt with as an example. A year ago, literally about a year ago, right about almost to the day, we were in the midst of realizing that our students who are out for spring break should be asked to stay out another week while we reset the clock for online. And then our students came back to pick up materials and go home. Now, when you have a lot of contracts and commitments in place with corporations, all of that falls apart. So it required you working with your partners, and then you found out who really was a partner. And in our case, we sent everyone home, and we had about 20 students on the campus that could not go home, or either didn't have a home to go to, they couldn't go home because international, they couldn't leave the United States. But we had shut down food service. But we had to depend upon our partner, though, even though it was not in the contract terms, and we were not living up to our side of the contract, having all these students here,
right,
to feed those students. And so I think it yielded a closer relationship and level of interaction with those partners. They were taking a loss, just like we were, but right. they stayed with us. The other thing that it showed us is that we had a contractual obligation for some build out and refurbishing and enhancing of our facilities, our dining facilities and our grill and cafe and all of that stuff. And we sat down with the partners with a common understanding. And they continued with that investment, even though they knew not only did we not have students in the summer, that we were not bringing students back for the most part in the fall. And we didn't know that we wouldn't have many students because of the rise in December, that we wouldn't have as many coming back as we wanted in the spring. And so that's when you find out when you have a true partner under these times of duress. And that's one thing that I noticed. It wasn't just transactional. It was we are in this with you.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to know, because when times get tough, you need to know that your partners, the folks that you're paying normally when everything's okay, right, are there for you when things are not okay. And I know that, of course, all of those contractors were also impacted, but right, you also had some issues, some kids that you needed to feed. So does anybody else want to chime in? Any of the other three HBCU presidents want to chime in on anything that has impacted them in the pandemic before we move on to another topic as we wrap up?
Well,
go ahead. I'll grab you, Brother Todd. Go ahead.
So I'll add really briefly. For us, the pandemic was mixed. And actually, as an underfunded school and as the only HBCU in South Carolina that we're not a part of UNCF, nor Thurgood Marshall, so we don't get any of those funds like All-Star. Everybody was excited. Our student was there too, but we're not included because they won't allow a 2-year college to join. So the pandemic, through some of the CARES Act funding, through some of the HERF funding, we were able to bring our campus up to a level technologically that it would not have happened had that not occurred. So we were able to outfit all of our classrooms with new technology. And this was because we had to. We were able to support students in a different way financially than we had previously been able to. Of course, it impacted enrollment, but what it did is it made us create wraparound services at a level that we should have had, because the state just said all state schools come back to normalcy, or all state entities. We came back in July of last year, and we've been back every day fully on campus since last year. We had students on campus in the fall. We had students on campus this spring. So, for us, it showed us what we were made of and made us think differently. And so I yield to Dr. DeJuan Wormack.
No problem, brother. Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Dr. Womack, before you chime in, I want to ask Dr. Todd. So, since you guys were all in full force, were your vendors there for you also? Were your contractors there for you also? Because again, they were impacted too.
Our contractors were there, and in fact, I think they appreciated us working with them. Because of the nature of a technical school, many of our alums have gone out and created businesses, and so we were able to utilize some of our businesses. I know, especially with President Clark, and probably with Dr. Wormack, they're entities that we sometimes use the same people, minority people especially, where they're saying, well, they're working on Claflin's campus right now, they're working on South Carolina State's campus right now, but they were here, they were helpful, they wanted to do whatever they could, because let's be clear, that's what HBCUs are built on. That's what the African American community is built on. When times are tough, we come in together and support each other. So yes, our vendors have been here. We got so much accomplished during the pandemic that we would have never been able to do without those funds and without that time to retool.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. DeJuan Wormack.
Thank you so much again. And I'll make it very brief. I think it was like all of us, not just HBCUs, but institutions across the country were challenged with the pandemic. And I've said before, when the world catch a cold, HBCUs catch COVID-19. Because of the historic underfunding, under resources that has happened to our institutions forever. But our focus has been always strategic to say we weren't just going to survive this pandemic, we were going to thrive through it. And so through that, we've had record fundraising. And so and during this year of a pandemic, we've raised over $30 million to come into this institution. And so we thank folks like Mackenzie Scott, who invested into HBCUs, who was not an HBCU person, but invested into a variety of other institutions. They'll be able to do that, and just even for us about being intentional. We became the first Zoom campus when this pandemic hit. We reached out to Zoom and said, there's this technology, the shift is happening. So how do you invest back into, and going back to Congressman Clyburn for opening that door and to us to bring corporations to the state of South Carolina. And so now we have students interning there. So we've maximized the challenge and turned it to opportunity. And so again, I think we have to do a better job, and I'll say this here, of telling our own story. No one's going to tell our story for us. Often mainstream media project all of the negative images about our institutions. But once again, it's very clear. We've been punching above our weight for a very long time. HBCUs represent less than 3% of colleges and universities in the United States. We enroll 12% of African American students, but nevertheless, we produce 23% of the African American graduates. 40% of the STEM graduates in the United States of America come from HBCUs. 60% of engineers come from HBCUs. If I'm a business, 50% of teachers, 40% of health professionals, 70% of doctors and physicians. If I'm a business, that's why I would invest my dollar, right? You won't get a better ROI than that type of production. But too often, we're not telling that story. We are the ones that's producing that workforce. We are the ones that have a successful model that's doing it. And so represent only 3% of the college and university in this country, but are producing that type of fruit from our labor. Interesting enough, we have to sell that story. And so for me, this pandemic has allowed me to tell that story and be able to maximize and leverage it to say, if you want your company to be successful, invest in these type of scholars that I'm going to send to you, and you will be successful. So.
Thank you, Dr. DeJuan Wormack. Dr. McNeely, you again posted in the private chat a couple of things that you want to share. If you'll unmute your mic.
Well, many of the students that all of our institutions serve will arrive with any number of uncertainties and concerns, food concerns, mental health concerns, the physical well-being of their families. And one of the things that our campuses have always been is a kind of oasis, if you will, from the storms that are commonplace in society writ large, but particularly in some of our communities. And so some of the loss of the things that make our campuses unique were things that we had to try and compensate for, and are still doing so. Certainly, we benefited from the largesse of certain of our partners, but I am concerned about the long-term sense of well-being of not just our kids, but our communities writ large. And I think we have an important role to play, not only for the people that we serve, but for the larger community. And certainly coming to us last is a loss for those who would do business, and especially to hope to do business better. And I would just say, last and foremost, diversity is not just about race and gender. It is about life experiences.
Yes.
It is about having different approaches to solve problems. And certainly our universities prepare students wonderfully with regards to all of the cognitive and technical skills, but they bring to the workforce a new way of looking at work, a new way of relating with people, and more specifically, caring about something beyond one's own self.
All right. As we wrap up, I want to ask one more question to each of you. Let's talk a little bit and kind of piggyback on what Dr. McNeely said about being diverse in the experiences. What courses and programs and activities do you offer your students related to careers in business? Dr. Clark, Mr. Clark, we'll start with you, please.
One of the things that that we think that we're quite proud of is our business school. First of all, is has a accreditation that's only maybe 6 or 7% of the schools in the nation have, and we have a wide variety of courses, and MBA programs, and different finance and et cetera, accounting programs there, and innovation and leadership programs. But one of the things that we do is we have an executive speaker series. And that executive speaker series brings executive in from a variety of a very diverse set of executives come to speak to the individuals that are in the classes, the students that are in the classes. And we think that the students benefit and the executives benefit, from that exchange, from that interaction. The students benefit because they get to see someone oftentimes that looks like them, that is a leader and can tell them what it took to get there. Another thing that we do, and we're working something with Google, is a program to help, I'll say, train and uplift our students and prepare them for the business world, whether it's preparing resumes, presentation, how to dress for success, so to speak, that interaction in the corporate world, and we're looking forward to that being a very powerful mechanism for the students, because as we know, it's not just about going to the class and getting a good grade. There's a whole preparation that's based on a lot of experiences that's really important. And it's some of the technical experiences that I was talking about with the Google program, but it's also the experiences that Dr. McNeely was talking about that helps instill the confidence in students that come from HBCUs, because they've been in an incubated environment, so to speak, to strengthen themselves, their minds, their muscles, their sense of well-being, such that they feel they're confident and they know that they can go and achieve things, and they're not timid about being able to do that, because we've provided an environment such they can have been able to prove their mettle.
Right. What about you, Dr. Todd? If you unmute your mic.
Oh, yes, ma'am. So we offer several courses as well, from business administration to office administrative technology, cybersecurity. We also, as a technical school, we have barbering and cosmetology. And we know for businesses, let's be real, all of us use those businesses frequently. We also have small business workshops. We do a lot of accounting classes here. We do computer technology. But for us, what we also do is we spend a lot of time working on those essential skills, or as people like to say, soft skills. I say essential skills on those skills that are needed for our students to be successful. So for instance, we have an agreement with Savannah River Remediation. We literally did a boot camp last weekend where we had students here on a Saturday. We worked with them on interview preparation. We worked with them on resume completion. And I'm sure everybody does this, but for us, I will say again that we understand that some of our young people come to us oftentimes underprepared or underexposed. And our goal is to meet them where they are and to make sure that when they leave here, they're as good, or as my granddaddy used to say, better than anybody else coming from anywhere else. And we feel good that the students we're getting from here are equipped to go out in the world, whether it's South Carolina, preferably South Carolina, but whether it's globally, and be successful and compete.
Yeah, that's so good, Dr. Todd, because you're right. Oftentimes, as a businesswoman, we see young people come to apply for jobs, and they just don't have those essential skills, as you say. They just can't articulate themselves. They can't, tell you anything about them. Our verbal communication skills have deteriorated as technology has advanced. And it is so very important for our young people to know how to talk. Their fingers are doing good. Sometimes that's a stretch too, Mr. Clark, because we see, I tell you, I believe that the onset of social media has truly uncovered people's lack of grammatical and spelling skills. So don't get me started on that one. But it is so important for our young people to be able to know how to speak correctly, to write correctly, to look at people in the eye when they're talking to them, to know how to shake their hand. Those are some of those things that I think are missing so often. So I appreciate the fact that you said that. Representative McDaniel, I want to close out the conversation today and the HBCU panel with you, asking again, what, in the words of Janet Jackson, what have you done for them lately, and what can you do? What can you do? And I really want to leave the panel with you all saying there will be a meeting of the minds. You need them, they need you. Dr. Warmack said that we are responsible for telling our own story. Black schools come from the Black church. Black lawmakers come from the Black church. We have all come from the same place, and we need each other to make this thing work for our young people. So can we work on a meeting of the mind so these HBCUs can get what they need, and you can get what you need from them to be able to advocate for them?
Absolutely. And thank you again, Trey. Most definitely we will. I can promise you all, we will be having that conversation. But also wanted to mention one or two more things before we go off. I'm not sure if you all have worked with DISA. That's Diane Sumter, who's helping with small businesses. If you all have not, please contact her so you can take advantage of all of that PPP and COVID-19 money that comes your way that you can take care of in helping to grow our students. Trey, I think we also need to have continual conversation with K-12, because we are sending students to our HBCUs and our higher ed environment that oftentimes are not ready. And I know at one point we wanted to introduce legislation to say that if they weren't ready and they had to be remediated, that K-12 had to pay the higher ed schools for remediating them. But that didn't go anywhere, but it still may come up now, you guys. And the other thing I wanted to mention just really quickly, and I seem to have lost what I typed in. But anyway, just talking, I just want to continue to just let you gentlemen know how proud I am of you. And when we reach out to you, we want you to be there. We want you to be ready. Go ahead and start pulling your requests of us together so it can be, quote, shovel ready. And I'll be talking to my colleagues in the Black Caucus. I think this conversation, this Zoom meeting, Trey, you have done an excellent job. I commend you for pulling us together. The questions that you asked, the territories that you embarked on were perfect. And so, gentlemen, I look forward And you all keep representing, keep being mentors for our young Black men. I love seeing you sitting there.
Thank you so much, Representative Annie McDaniel, District 41, Chesterfield, Fairfield, and Richland counties. Allen University President, Dr. Ernest McNeely. Also, South Carolina State President, Mr. James Clark. Denmark Technical College President, Dr. Willie Todd, and Dr. Dewan Warmack, Claflin University President. Gentlemen and lady, thank you so much again for joining us for the 2021 South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus Minority Business Forecast. We appreciate you. Good luck to you. God bless. And we look forward to that conversation. Want to thank also everyone who is watching today. Don't forget to continue to post and share this information out. Great information, excellent resources, and that's not all. Coming up next, the local government roundtable, and a special shout out to 3 young African Americans who have made history in South Carolina, being the first mayors in their respective cities. That's coming up next on the Minority Business Roundtable. I'm Trey Taylor.
The South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus was founded in 1975 with the mission to improve the quality of life for Black and minority communities in South Carolina. Since its founding under the leadership of Judge Ernest Finney Jr., the caucus has been the catalyst behind significant legislative action and policy changes in South Carolina that brought efforts of justice and fairness for all South Carolinians. Caucus efforts have led to state statute requiring consideration of minority businesses in the process of awarding state contracts, the creation of the Governor's Office for Small and Minority Businesses, the South Carolina Commission of Minority Affairs, and the state's Human Affairs Commission. The caucus is currently comprised of 45 members, including 12 state senators and 33 members of the South Carolina House of Representatives. In January 2021, State Representative Patricia Hennigan assumed the role of chair of the caucus, marking the third woman to be elected to lead the historic organization. Chair Hennigan has announced an active and comprehensive plan for the caucus that centers on increasing overall exposure and opportunities for minority communities across South Carolina. The South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus remains committed to its founding motto: like limbs, we reach toward the sun, but feed from a common root. The caucus remains readily available to serve the citizens of South Carolina, continuously fighting for justice and fairness.
Good morning to the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus. I bring you greetings from the R.C. Wilson Group and the Wilson family. I've been blessed to have been able to work with the caucus for over 25 years, working to help to improve the quality of life of families in our communities. The 2021 Minority Business Forecast proves to continue that legacy under the leadership of Chairwoman Pat Hennigan. I am excited, and I'm looking forward to being enriched by the panelists, the panel, and the moderator. Good luck. God bless you. And I am excited to be a part of this. Thank you.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans, and soon they will be available to everyone.
This vaccine means hope. It will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
I want to go back to work, and I want to be able to move around.
To visit with Michelle's mom, to hug her and see her on her birthday.
You know what I'm really looking forward to is going to opening day in Texas Ranger Stadium with a full stadium.
We've lost enough people, and we've suffered enough damage.
In order to get rid of this pandemic, it's important for our fellow citizens to get vaccinated.
I'm getting vaccinated because we want this pandemic to end as soon as possible.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
So roll up your sleeve and do your part.
This is our shot. Now it's up to you.
Thank you for joining us for the 2021 South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus Minority Business Forecast, bringing together South Carolina lawmakers and the state's most prominent professionals and minority business leaders covering topics and issues vital to competitiveness and overall success. Please tag, post, and share this informative conversation filled. Thank you for joining us for the 2021 South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus Minority Business Forecast, bringing together South Carolina lawmakers and the state's most prominent professionals and minority business leaders covering topics and issues vital to competitiveness and overall success. Please tag, post, and share this informative conversation filled with important information, valuable advice, and key resources. Please welcome our panelists for the Local Government Roundtable. Senator John Scott. He was first elected to the South Carolina Senate in 2008 and currently serves on various committees, including Education, Finance, Medical Affairs, Legislative Oversight, and the Banking and Insurance Committee. Prior to being elected to the Senate, Senator Scott served in the South Carolina House of Representatives from 1990 until 2008. Councilman Johnny Wright Sr. He was elected to the Orangeburg County Council in 1994 and served as the County Council Chairman since 2009. Along with being the chairman of the Orangeburg County Council, Councilman Wright also serves as the president of the South Carolina Association of Counties. Mayor Gerald Sanders was the first African American elected mayor of the town of Swansea. Elected in 2017, Mayor Sanders also serves as the chairman of the South Carolina Conference of Black Mayors. Mayor Steve Benjamin. He's served as Columbia, South Carolina's mayor since 2010 and has won every election since. Mayor Benjamin has served as the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors from 2018 to 2019, former African American Mayors Association president from 2015 through 2016, along with many other accomplishments. And Mayor Teresa Irvin, the first African American and first woman to hold this position in Florence, South Carolina. Prior to that, Mayor Irvin served on the Florence City Council since 2010 and has been a registered nurse for 39 years. Please welcome our panelists for this afternoon's session.
Good afternoon once again, and thank you for joining us for the second panel discussion, the 2021 Minority Business Forecast for the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus. This one is the Local Government Roundtable. And first, we're going to talk to Senator John Scott, Mayor Steve Benjamin, and Mayor Teresa Irvin. Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Look forward to it.
Thank you. I want to remind you to please, make sure your mic is unmuted when we have the conversation. You can go back on mute when you're not speaking. I want to ask you all first, the COVID-19 pandemic, which hopefully we're almost wrapped up with now, has had a significant impact on all elements of our lives and all levels of government, federal, state, and local, as a matter of fact. How have local governments coped with the challenges brought by the pandemic? I'll start with you, Mayor Benjamin.
Thank you, Trey. We've tried to be guided by our one true north. Our one true north is the preservation of human life. And obviously, once we were able to do as much as we could in that direction, the focus has been on, once you stop focusing on saving lives or adjust it to saving livelihoods. And we decided that in the spirit of this meeting today, that we're going to focus intensely on making sure that small businesses are going to make it through the very difficult early days of the pandemic. Our Resilient Columbia fund that we established helped 323 businesses immediately out the gate, about $1.5 million with a small business stabilization fund. We've continued that effort, particularly using some federal funds through the EDA. That we've also gotten out about $2.5 million to small businesses. We believe strongly in data and good public health data that helps us make decisions. Data gives you intelligence allows you to make good policy, and we've been focusing intensely. Sometimes when the White House and even some other leaders were not focusing on public health to make sure that particularly people in our community who we know had a disparate impact, that they were going to be able to make it through this most difficult time.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Benjamin. Mayor Irvin, I'll ask you the same question. How have you in Florence dealt with the pandemic? Can you take yourself off mute, please? Oh, yeah.
There we go.
Thank you.
I would concur with Mayor Benjamin. Our first focus was on human lives, on our citizens. What were their needs? We were sure that we had our mask mandate. I'm a nurse, so at the forefront, my focus was making sure people stayed as healthy as possible so that we could limit the spread of this disease of the COVID-19. So we introduced our mask ordinance along with reinforcing social distancing and washing your hands. So we took health first of all. Then when we received our CARE Act funds, we did set up funding so our businesses could actually request funds to help them maintain their business at the level they could with all the various restrictions they face. But not only that, we coordinated with our healthcare providers. We needed to be sure that everyone had access to testing because at the initial phase of this virus, we didn't have a vaccine, but what we could do was test to see where is this virus being sprayed the most at. So we actually had mobile test sites that our healthcare providers here in the city of Florence did for each community. And it was wonderful because people then were able to get tested, and if they were positive, they could actually self-quarantine. We also had PDRTA who provide transportation for the citizens. So it took a burden off of a lot of the citizens who have been low income or moderate income who would not have been able to afford to have the transportation to the site. But as we tested and worked with the healthcare providers as well, we want to be sure that we stayed connected with our state and federal government so we could be aware of any funds that came through or any treatment for this virus that we could provide for our citizens. Then when it comes to our businesses, when it came to our downtown area, we actually took on advertising for them, which took money that would usually be spent for advertisement. They didn't have to provide that anymore. It allowed them to shift to be able to go to a lower capacity with their service, but also they could do pickup and mobile delivery. So for us as a city, we coordinated with our citizens, with our healthcare, and also with our business owners so that we could maintain a sense of normalcy. We were in a new norm, and we want to be sure that we had utilized the greatest potential that we could to keep life as normal as it could, as we all try to survive this COVID-19 virus. And where we're at right now, we're working with our healthcare providers to make sure that everyone have access to the vaccine, which as you've seen through media, it has been hard, especially in your low to moderate income areas to get that. But our healthcare providers have worked selflessly together to make sure any and everyone who wanted the vaccine would be able to get it. So those are just a few of the things that we've done to be sure that we are meeting the needs of our citizens here in Florence. And as we're doing this, we're hoping to be able to support other neighboring cities, which we have done because we have 3 large healthcare providers here in the city who work with outlying sister areas. But that's just a quick synopsis of some of the things that we did.
Thank you, Mayor Irvin. Before I bring in Senator Scott, I want to ask both you, Ms. Irvin, Mayor Irvin, and you, Mayor Benjamin, as far as small and minority businesses are concerned, I'm sure there were particular challenges. Was there something that you and your municipalities did specifically to help those small and minority businesses? And we'll start with you, Mayor Benjamin.
Sure. No, absolutely, Trey. You know, we have a Mayor's Minority Business Council that we set up several years ago that's helped guide the process through our Office of Business Opportunities. We made sure, obviously, that as these funds were dispersed, the several $1 million, that they were dispersed in a very equitable manner, with 40% of those funds going to Black-owned businesses. Across the city, veteran-owned businesses, as well as a number of women-owned businesses. We've upped, of course, our mandatory MBE participation up to 15%. We exceeded that goal, and we're going to continue climbing there. And then also, just in the wake of all the challenges, we decided that it was time to have another disparity study. So we put our RFQ just a couple months ago for our first disparity study in gosh, maybe 15 years. But an intense focus on Black and brown businesses, particularly service-oriented businesses where a lot of our folks work, and we saw them having an immediate impact, particularly when businesses started shutting down back in March, with an intense focus on minority-owned and Black-owned businesses.
Thank you, Mayor Benjamin. What about you, Mayor Irvin, in Florence? Was there a particular focus on making sure those small and minority businesses were taken care of?
Well, once again, I'll concur with Mayor Benjamin. Many of the same focus that he had, we had as well. But one of the great things I've found by being a minority myself, and when it comes to business, I'm familiar with a lot of the minority business owners. So I have that direct communication with them. When the opportunity arose that we were giving the funds out from the CARE Act, I personally contacted several of the business owners to make sure they were aware of the funding. Because even though sometimes we may advertise that we have a city site, sometimes people just don't receive that information. But so there was a focus that I personally contacted them and allowed them to know. And by word of mouth, they got it to other business owners. But we had that focus that we have a listing of the businesses, so we know who is who. And we were sure that all of our businesses who desired the funding had access to receive that funding. So we had that focus, and we made sure that these businesses were businesses that were smaller businesses, especially located here in the city of Florence. So
Right.
we didn't focus.
That's great. So glad that that extra step was taken, because just like we know, Black and brown people have been affected more, due to COVID-19. The businesses have also been affected even more than other businesses for a variety of reasons. Senator Scott, I'd like to bring you in because I want to know what legislatively can be done to help not only small and minority businesses, but to help folks like Mayor Benjamin, Mayor Myers, Mayor Irvin, and our other panelists. How can you help them help the citizens that they serve?
Well, thank you, Trey, and for allowing me to participate in this forum. I just filed a bill S644, which transfer the certification and contractual services from Department of Administration over to small and minority business. What we found as we debated the $1.2 billion in CARE Act and went to Department of Administration, and had an outside private company that made determination from the line items we gave from foundations, small businesses, along with the larger businesses in the state. A lot of small businesses did not receive what I would consider to be their fair equity in terms of funding. And so I've had some conversation with Department of Administration. And so we're going to put this particular bill has already been filed. It's in finance now. If not, we'll try to put it in the budget, or even when the CARES Act money comes, we'll add it as provision to allow the transfer. I think it's about 2 FTEs that's in the Department of Administration that actually does that review. But we need smaller minority business more hands-on in trying to help us make that decision in terms of where this money is going to go. This money this time will be approximately $2.1 billion. The last time we were very much so concerned as these small businesses, barber shops, nail shops, other kinds of smaller shops who a lot of hands-on, who was very easy to be able to be affected by the COVID, that there was enough unemployment insurance available. I think we spent over $1 billion. So a lot of money did go to make sure that at least there was some type of funding coming back into those households. We still ask, although it's not been mandated by the state, that you still continue to wear your mask. Now, one of the other things we are doing now, we're going to the 1B sector, that these small business owners immediately get their shots. And we're going to open it up. It may come faster than all the shots come out. And so it may, if you don't have your shot, it's so easy to get infected. That means you're going to be off for 2 weeks, provided if you don't get really, really sick. And so we're going to be I'm going to take a more hands-on approach this time to the small business part. I sat on finance, and as we reviewed the funding that came in, we made sure that the outside of just a small and minority business, you also have HBCUs and also small infant colleges. A lot of African Americans and other minorities work at those locations. So we made sure they've got funding. But I guess the biggest winner of the day in rural communities with small business we did find in the state, after many, many hours of work, we were able to take a bill that I've been working on since last year and create a broadband legislation. There's another bill I have out there too, which will expand broadband, which means a small minority business in rural counties that don't have very good broadband will be able to really connect to what's going on in these urban centers. It's a slow process. We know there's a lot of work being done on the federal side. So we're hoping that small minority business also take the advantage of expanding broadband in these communities, especially in working with the schools. We use portable device, but it's time for us to really get serious about these schools and also these small businesses being able to compete no matter where you are in the state.
Absolutely, Senator Scott. I think one of the things that came out during this pandemic is the incredible lack of internet access, broadband that is available. I mean, you can sometimes be downtown Columbia, Mayor Benjamin, and drop, don't have internet more or less in some of these rural areas. So I know that is such an important move to make sure, particularly, for our schools and of course our businesses, that internet access is available and strong and accessible. I want to bring in the other two panelists because you mentioned those billions of dollars that are being allocated. And I'm sure these gentlemen want to get in on there because they want to make sure that not only Mayor Benjamin in Columbia and in Greenville and in Charleston, they're getting some of those billion with a B dollars, that some of these smaller cities are also. Mayor Gerald Sanders, president of the South Carolina Conference of Black Mayors and mayor of the town of Swansea, joins us. Also, Councilman Johnny Wright, president of the South Carolina Association of Counties and Orangeburg County Council chair. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining the conversation. What do you need in your local governments to continue surviving, and what will you need to recover from the pandemic? Mayor Sanders, you can go first, please. Can you?
All right. Thank you for on this morning, and greeting to all of the rest of the panelists on the rostrum this morning. In the rural areas, we've been hit tremendously hard. First of all, what we would need is continued support and help from our national government and state government as well. The CARES Act has helped us tremendously with the testing for COVID, and now we are moving into the stage of the vaccine. We've partnered with our local medical center, Lexington Medical Center, in providing those vaccines in our area. Next 2 weeks, I understand, they will roll out their mobile units where they will come and initiate those vaccines to those who want them. We are stressing tremendously to those that might be a little skeptical about the vaccine to get vaccinated, that we can get back to our lives as we once knew it. We know it's not going to be the same. There's some things that we're going to have to do differently. And we are spreading the word in the rural areas and supporting our rural mayors in getting this done. Another thing that we need in the rural areas that has impacted our area is feeding the multitudes of people that have lost jobs and wages and so forth. Children are not being able to go to school where they were getting meals at least 2 or 3 times a day. Now that falls back on the families, and we've been working diligently with those partners in the community and in our government to help get folks fed. We have a lot of folks that, as I said before, lost their jobs, so they're living in cars. And even we had a person just a week or so ago, we found that was living in the woods. And it's been devastating for the rural area people. So we're going to have to help find shelter and get people indoors, so to speak, back to their livelihoods. And these are just some of the things that the rural area is working very hard on. And I heard someone talk about the broadband, and that Senator Scott is something that we would love to work with you on and support you on, because that's very much needed in the rural area, is the broadband.
Thank you. And you, Mr. Wright, Councilman Wright, can you unmute, please? Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you so very much, and good morning to all of you, and thank you for inviting me on this panel this morning. And as I listened to most of the other panelists, I guess they have echoed most of the things, and I don't want to be redundant. But when you asked about what local government needs to continue to survive, is we need as much support as we can, because we have, exhausted a lot of resources when it comes to PPE and trying to reconfigure our places in our buildings and other places of that nature. But we also will continue to be careful and strategically approach all through this year here to see if we can get back where we need to be, to try to maintain a safe environment as possible in our buildings and for both of our employees and our citizens. We constantly also monitor the CD19 data, and especially when we get hopefully this year we'll be able to get back on our tax sale to try to raise some funds. We curtailed it last year because of the pandemic, and we hope that we will be able to have it this December. And also that so that we can have it in a safe manner. And our employees are currently eligible for the COVID-19 vaccine, and we have been trying our very best to have whole clinics where we can get the allocated amount to do so, and to get all of our people vaccinated as quick as possible. And we take advantage of any opportunity that we have when it comes to things like that. We keep applying for any kind of revenues from state or federal levels to try to help us get through this. We are the largest rural county in the state, and Orangeburg County has have a lot of challenges because of that. I mean, you're sparsely out. You got a lot of people out, and people was talking earlier about internet services and things of that nature. I represent a real rural area. I represent the lower eastern end of the county. I have all of Holly Hill, Utahville, Vance, part of Santee in my district alone, District 1. And my district touches Berkeley County and Dorchester County. And even though those are fast-growing counties, and Orangeburg County is even kind of like squeezed in, but we are doing what we can to get through this. And I think that we have done very well considering where we are located, because we started early enough when this thing hit to try to tweak our resources and put things in place to kind of deal with it. And I think we've done well with that.
Well, I want to ask you, Councilman Wright, I want to also ask Mayor Sanders, especially the two of you, because you're in the more rural South Carolina. And I spoke about this in our last panel with the HBCUs. Do you feel like you're getting what you need from legislators?
Well, I would say this much, that we don't always get what we want. And sometimes—
Do you get what you need?
We don't always get what we need all the time, but I gotta say we have a good working relationship.
That's important.
With our legislators, both federal and state because of the fact that Congressman Claflin lives in Orangeburg County, and and Senator Matthews, before he retired, lived in Orangeburg County, and we had direct access to them. I've known Senator Matthews. He taught my two oldest kids in school before he got on the legislature. And I've, we've worked very well with that. It's always room for improvement. And as someone used to say, when you're in politics, you got to know how to count. Some things you just don't get, even though when they might be willing to support something, they might not have the numbers to always get it. Mm-hmm. So, and the rural area has real challenges because of the way the formula is set up. You know that a lot of things is by the numbers. And when you don't have the numbers, it makes a big difference. Our county is around 90,000, according to the census count, a little better. And so we have a lot of things that we don't qualify for because of the numbers, where in the Greenville and the Charlestons and the others, they do, and they kind of outbid us on that kind of stuff. And so I used to say to them, when you live downhill, everything falls downhill, and I can't say all I say behind that, but I live in the real lower end of the county, and I just know how things do sometimes. So I understand, so I can only advocate and ask and do all I can to try to improve and get what I can get. So having said that, if you're asking me if I get everything I need, no, but this is not a perfect world. So.
No, I just want to know if you're getting what you need. And that's Orangeburg County Council Chair Johnny Wright. What about you, Mayor Sanders in Swansea? Are you getting what you need?
Well, I can say that we are getting what we need. We have formed partnerships with our state and local partners in the area, our elected officials. And I think we have one of the greatest senators in Lexington County that supports us. When I give him a call, he's always there, and he gets what we need. Also, I want to say that Mayor Benjamin has been a great asset to the rural areas, and me especially. We have formed a partnership. I can call on him, and he has partners that he's not afraid to share with us and help us to get the various materials and whatever situation we might be in, to help us and lead us in the right direction to get the kind of help we need. And that's very helpful, because in unfortunate times that we're in right now, those partnerships are very helpful. They're very important. And I think that we have done that, and we want to reach out to our other mayors throughout South Carolina and doing the same. So I think, to answer your question, we are getting what we need at this point. However, as other panelists have said, we're going to need much more going forward.
Right. That's Mayor Gerald Sanders from the town of Swansea. And it is important. And that's why I wanted to ask the question, because relationships are important. And it's great that you have that relationship with Mayor Benjamin. And you've got to have those relationships also with the folks that represent your cities, your towns, your communities. Thank you so much for joining us for the 2021 South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus Minority Business Forecast. My name is Trey Taylor. We are talking to local government officials. Of course, you just heard from Mayor Gerald Sanders, the mayor of the town of Swansea. Also next to him is Councilman Johnny Wright. He's in Orangeburg. He's Orangeburg County Council Chair. Mayor Teresa Irvin, the mayor of Florence, and then Mayor Steve Benjamin with Columbia, South Carolina. And next to him, Senator John Scott. He represents District 19 in Richland County. I want to encourage you to post and share this information out, because this is such an important conversation as we shift the conversation to working with minority business. How would you grade your working relationships with DBEs and minority businesses within your community? Mayor Irvin, I want to start with you, please, ma'am. If you could unmute your mic. Thank you.
Well, being the newest mayor on the block, I'm aware of the businesses and I'm building those relationships. As a city councilwoman, I also had that relationship. So being able to attend various meetings. Many of the minority businesses in the city of Florence, the owners are friends of mine. So I have that direct relationship. One of the things that I know that we need to work on is that when we have minority businesses, which are a part of our chamber, several of the smaller businesses feel like they don't receive the same support businesses receive. So as mayor, that's one of the things I want to focus on, improving that network. So when you have a minority business who's a part of any organization, that they are giving that equal opportunity to present their services, but when opportunity arises, that they receive the information. So for me, it will be building those relationships, listening to the minority businesses, seeing what they say they need, and then focus so that we can get those things provided. And recognizing the fact that a lot of time minority businesses don't always have access to the same funds that larger businesses may have. And that was one of the issues that actually came up, especially during COVID-19, was having the access to the funds, even if it's a grant or a loan, being able to open those gateways so that they can have access to the funds. Funds, when it comes to a business, is really what keeps a business afloat.
Absolutely.
So for me, that will be my focus as mayor, is improving that network for availability for minority and small businesses to have access to funding. But not only that, when it comes to being able to have the service on the internet media, just as we've spoken about broadband, your smaller businesses and minority businesses sometimes don't have the media present that is needed so that their businesses can be, advertised. So focus upon funding and also media for our small businesses will be two of the things I've heard a lot about, and I do want to focus upon improving for our small and minority businesses.
Do you have any ideas of how to do that specifically, Mayor Irvin?
Well, actually, that's great. We have a Florence Downtown Development Corporation. Our leader or director for that actually works with the businesses. And one of the things I said that during COVID-19, this corporation, the Florence Downtown Development Corporation, took over the advertisement, which actually helped the small businesses and the minority businesses to start achieving that media presence. So we're actually already doing that. We just received the Downtown Mainstream Award. And one of the things that was recognized were the things that we were doing to help our businesses to be more publicly aware of what was being provided, that media service. So we're actually already doing it. And we've started primarily because of COVID, but now that we've done it and we see that need, we can build upon it. So we can expand that. And there's some other things that we're looking at how we can do it, but as we're working upon, I don't want to speak it right now until we can truly develop it. So we're working on those now.
Thank you. Mayor Benjamin, I want to ask you a similar question, but I want to flip it a little bit because I think, and if you don't mind my saying, I think Columbia, you have been very successful in working with your small minority businesses and your DBE, particularly through your Office of Business Opportunities. What would you say to, or advice you would give, or some of the things that have worked for you in Columbia, working with those smaller minority businesses that you could perhaps help some of these other mayors that they could implement in their cities and towns?
Well, I think the same intentionality that Mayor Myers-Irvin discussed is what you have to bring. That when you have the greatest pandemic since 1918, the greatest economic disruption we've seen certainly in election years since 1932, and we of course can't forget about the great social unrest that we see because of systemic racism and police violence since 1968, all wrapped up into 1 year. You have to actually find ways that you can do things, as the mayor said, for businesses that they would normally do for themselves. How do you take these expenses off their ledger and offer these services? So we've been very aggressive, as you know, through the Office of Business Opportunities under Melissa Linda's leadership, reaching out directly to businesses, finding out what you need. And when we decided to set up these different funds and these partnerships, we got the money out the door probably within 10 days. I mean, we were very aggressive. Some of the issues, I believe maybe Mayor Sanders mentioned around PPE, making sure that businesses, remember very early on, people couldn't find PPE. I mean, it was very difficult to find it. So we were able to use the buying authority of the city to procure it and make sure that folks had it, understanding that access to PPE, particularly to folks who are working in the service economy, people who needed it the most, and who, quite frankly, were getting infected and dying at a higher rate, making sure that was there. So it does require really focused efforts, really focused programs, a significant amount of outreach, not a whole lot of red tape, and then just being just as flexible as you can possibly be. But focusing on the issues that everyone talked about. Now, how do you make sure that people have housing? How you deal with issues of food insecurity? Focusing on the real health disparities that exist, and all of us, we sometimes we was walking pre-existing conditions. The digital divide. The focus. Senator Scott made a reference earlier about focusing more on small businesses. You're not going to find many legislators in this country who do more to help small businesses than John Scott, including helping do a deep dive. We had a project, Trey, over in the colony in Bethel Bishop, trying North Point now, trying to make sure that kids over there had access to Wi-Fi, so that they could get to their homework and everything else. But this is not small business oriented, but all understanding the interconnectivity. Senator Scott has led the charge in successive years to make sure that livability issues, access issues to families and children over there, and that's not even his district, that those issues are being met. So he's been a champion for us. The issues that I mentioned earlier about bank access and making sure that as this PPP money started flowing to businesses, we had this kind of stand in the gap, working with banks like Optus and great companies like Dietz and Diane Sumter to make sure that businesses that normally would get passed over, that we had to make sure we stood in the gap and made sure they got access to these PPP money at a rate that they also deserved. So it just requires the kind of focused intentionality that Mayor Myers-Irvin talked about. And I appreciate Mayor Sanders' comments. The reality is that we keep a pretty active text thread going between mayors, and we just share information as much as possible. And the reality is that the problems that I'm dealing with here are the same in Florence, the same in Swansea, the same that Councilman Wright's dealing with down in Orangeburg County. They're scalable. They're a little bit different if you go rural, suburban, or urban, but they're all the same. And just having really good partners like Senator Scott and obviously Congressman Clyburn and others that help us get help to people now has been the key to success. And but we know we still got a whole lot more to do.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Benjamin. Senator Scott, I'm going to get you in here in just a minute, but before that, I want to ask Mayor Sanders about the South Carolina Conference of Black Mayors. Tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing with that organization and how you all, as Mayor Benjamin said, can come together to kind of address some of these issues.
Well, what we have done, I began my reign as president of the South Carolina Conference of Black Mayors in October. And what we've been doing lately is to kind of restructure, reorganize our group, that we can reach out to other Black mayors across South Carolina, because we want to bring that nucleus together, because with numbers, we're strong, we have a strength where we can continue to work with the Legislative Black Caucus and others to make things happen in South Carolina. We're reaching out at this point, to other Black mayors to come and join the organizations. Perhaps they have not even heard of the South Carolina Conference of Black Mayors, and I thank a lot for the help of Mayor Benjamin. He's been very helpful with us on that endeavor to strengthen our numbers, that we can reach out to other mayors and assist them and help them during situations like we're in right now with the pandemic and other situations that they might face in the future. So those are just minute, some things that we're trying to do at this point.
If people want more information, other mayors want more information about the South Carolina Conference of Mayors, how can they reach out?
They can reach out to me, either give me a call at 803-622-8361, or they can email me at jsanders57@live.com.
All right.
And we'll make sure that they get the information.
Councilman Johnny Wright, I want to ask you also about the South Carolina Association of Counties. You're the president. Congratulations. Tell us a little bit about that organization.
Well, it's basically an organization that really comes together to share information and to support each other, as just like the mayors were talking about, sharing information with each other and be there for each other. Of course, the difference is that the makeup of the counties are completely different. And you have a lot of small minority counties, you have a lot of small rural counties, you have a lot of different issues that's there. But what the Association of County does is that it's a group that's basically set up to make sure that they go and advocate to Senator Scott and those on the needs of the county, on what we need from local government, from them to help local government survive. And that's basically the purpose of it. I mean, that's basically, we have, the group they have several attorneys, and each one of them assigned different levels. It's almost like a committee. You know, you have a committee with land use. It depends on what the topic is, and they go to. We tell them, we meet about 3 or 4 times a year, and we come up with things that we want to make law, and then we pass that on to those attorneys, and those attorneys go to the State House and advocate that to the senators and the House of Representatives and all that on, this is what local government wants and this is what we need. We get some of it and some of it we don't get, but I think if you keep the communication going between the legislators and your local people, you get pretty good what you want to get to a point. Senator Matthews and Representative Gilda Cobb Hunter, which represent my district, we have a very good working relationship down here. We meet monthly, what we call a concerned citizen group, and they share the information that's going on up there, and then they ask for our input. They will say, we can make this happen or we can't make this happen. And that's a good comfort level for the county. And we work very well together in getting other things done. This year has been a little different, being the president of the South Carolina Association of County, which I'm very much grateful for the opportunity to do that. But because of the pandemic, we did most things virtually, and a lot of other meetings we canceled because of that situation. So it's a little different this year. So it's been a challenge here also, but technology has helped us to do what we can.
All right, Thank you, Councilman Wright. I tell you, time flies when you're talking about important issues and having fun. Senator Scott, I want to leave the conversation today asking you the final question about what the state can do to help DBEs, to help minority businesses, particularly to help, again, these folks, these mayors, these councilmen, help their small and minority and women-owned businesses in South Carolina.
Well, thank you again. One of the things I want us to focus on is where the state is putting its funding. And even with the new CARES Act money, it's going to be in the next 2 years focused basically a lot on infrastructure, along with vaccines and others. Now, we've done a lot of work with SCDOT. They now have a minority director who's been there now some 5 or 6 years. We've been able to make sure that director is at the cabinet level working exclusively with the director. And we've been able to exceed in the past what minorities have been able to get in terms of contractual service contracts from SCDOT. So I invite them to become more involved in that process. Also, what was left up on the table for discussion, I can't let this go by because the Councilman Wright mentioned it, feeding the hungry people. Along with trying to getting the community back health, that would recommend they begin to talk to USDA. Last month, we gave out almost 1,100 food boxes to families. This month, we'll probably do 2,200. So begin to have that relationship. The other part is for our business to become even more healthier, began to work with the bankers. And walking away from this particular conference today, it left me to do some additional work, and it is to begin to look at where we can begin to build a small business institute so we can bring not only just small business, but also the government entities, and taking a look at what they can do for contractual services. I want to go back to a comment Mayor Benjamin made, and he talked about something very important, and that was partnering. Began to have partnerships with local government, and yes, I'm enjoying a good partnership with the mayor on another project as well. And I think this is a second large project, one we did when it first came into the Senate, a big project on North Main Street. And that partnership, I think they probably net some $7 million from that partnership. So you got to begin to ask your legislators, what can y'all do in terms of finding funding that we create partnership with these state agencies, especially in terms of the funds that are out there. Well, I also want members of local government that we're getting ready to do reapportionment, and also the census information it will be coming in. Most of your funds that you get from the state is done through what's called revenue sharing. I think that's what Mayor Sanders was talking about. A lot of the rural counties have lost population. So real good discussion to make sure there's equity, especially in a growing county like Florence County with the new Mayor Urban list there, to make sure Florence gets its proper amount of funding so it doesn't begin to lose ground and growth. Because once you do that, there's no additional tax base that these small businesses can receive from local government. The other part is just being patient until we grow the business back and people begin to move around again and to spend money. We depend a lot on visitors coming to the state and accommodations, which is a big issue whether you're at the coast or in the upstate. As these small counties lose population, we've got to gain control to figure out what's going on. Now we increase teacher pay; they'll get an additional $650, but that's just the beginning. There's another piece of legislation I have out there: teacher incentive pay, so we can get young teachers and young folk to want to move back in these rural counties. You can't continue to educate them; they move into the urban centers. Now the state did grow from 4.68 million to approximately 5.2 million people. But the question is, where did these young people go? Now, we're educating them, but they're not coming back at home. And so we've got a lot of work to do outside of in small counties as we see franchise companies coming into these locations. But the minority companies aren't getting the franchise contract and then not becoming part of the franchises. So they're going to move to locations that they can. We've been working with our colleges and universities on diversity. Diversity is about keeping our brightest home. And a lot of our minority students and majority students have been going elsewhere. When they educate them, they don't come back to us. So we can't continue to bring Fortune 500 companies into South Carolina. We don't have young people available to be able to work. So it's not just one answer to how we fix the small minority a problem, but it's just a lot of things coupled into one. I really appreciate us having this conversation today. At least it begins that conversation of so many things that we need to do so that we can help support our minority businesses, from education, which includes diversity, to providing infrastructure, to providing just small capital funding. And so we're going to continue to work on these projects. We're going to continue to work with our HBCUs and trying to create some institutes so they too can help us. They've got the young people there and try to get them to understand what's going on. But early on, gain some working with these corporations that are already here. The question early on talked about broadband. Broadband this time in rural counties is different. We're working with co-ops and Santee Cooper. These are people that you're very much so quite familiar with. These are the folk who can give you information as we expand broadband. But the best part of all of it, the co-ops belong to the people in which they serve. thank you so much for allowing me to participate today.
Thank you so much, Senator John Scott. I appreciate it. You made some great points. And as a matter of fact, we actually spoke about the importance and need for not only HBCUs conversing and collaborating with legislators in our last panel, but also the need for to make sure there are things for those young people to come back to South Carolina for. So I will say the same thing I said in the last panel. I do hope, as you said, that this is just the beginning of what should be, can be, needs to be an ongoing conversation so that legislators can hear from the cities and towns in South Carolina, and those mayors, those councilmen and women can also talk to and communicate with the folks at the State House so that there's an open line of communication so everybody can be heard and get what they want and need. Senator John Scott, District 19, Richland County, thank you again so much for joining us. Mayor Steve Benjamin, Columbia, South Carolina. Mayor Teresa Irvin with Florence, South Carolina, and also Councilman Jimmy Wright, President of the South Carolina Association of Counties and Orangeburg County Council Chair. And finally, Mayor Gerald Sanders, President of the South Carolina Conference of Black Mayors and the Mayor of the town of Swansea. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank all of you for watching the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus Minority Business Forecast. Before we leave this panel, I do want to recognize 3 young African Americans who became mayor in their cities, the first time African American mayors. And we'll put that graphic up. Robert Woodbury from the town of Mullins, LaDonna Hall from Sally, and Marcus Rivera from Barnwell. Congratulations to those 3. And we're so glad that they are making African-American history right here in South Carolina. Thank you again so much. Coming up next, the Small Business Roundtable. Please continue to post, share, and tag this important information out, and we'll be right back with more from the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus Minority Business Forecast. I'm Trey Taylor.
Good morning and welcome to the 2021 South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus Minority Business Forecast. This is a new effort by the caucus, but one that we hope will become an annual event. The state of minority small business is very important to members of the caucus and me. This event is designed to bring together South Carolina lawmakers with the state's most prominent minority business leaders for a frank discussion of issues vital to South Carolina minority business competitiveness and overall production. This event will also link DBEs and minority businesses with state agencies and departments with independent contractual opportunities. We have assembled a knowledgeable and exciting group of panel and panelists, all given the charge by me to help South Carolina minority businesses start, expand, and achieve success. I hope you enjoy the forecast. And please remember, you can always call on me and the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus to be on the front lines fighting for you. I welcome you to the 2021 Minority Business Forecast.
The Carolina Panorama has been the news and information source for the African American community in South Carolina since 1986. Founded by Nathaniel Abraham Sr., the publication is now in its 2nd generation and being managed by Nathaniel Abraham Jr. Like and follow the Panorama on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and pick up your copy of the Carolina Panorama every Thursday. Positive news for a positive community. The Carolina Panorama.
Our story is we started live streaming way before it was popular. We were live streaming and trying to get event planners to live stream back when they said, nah, people won't show up. But COVID happened, and all of a sudden those same people started coming to us with masks on their faces and saying, hey, what was that you said about live streaming? And we've been happily serving the community and the government and helping get important messages out ever since. Thankful for that, and we can help your business do the same at www.freethinkersradio.com.
COVID-19 has changed how we express our faith and gather to worship. We all want to get back to how we pray, how we congregate, how we lift our voices in praise. Now it's time to take the first step that lets us get back to spreading the word without spreading concern. Before we can safely come together, we need the facts. As COVID-19 vaccines become available, you may have questions.
Should I get it?
Is it safe?
Should I wait?
It's okay to have questions. Now get the facts. Learn more at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you.
Welcome back to the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus 2021 Minority Business Forecast, bringing together South Carolina lawmakers and the state's most prominent professionals and minority business leaders covering topics and issues vital to competitiveness and overall success. Please tag, post, and share this informative conversation filled with important information, valuable advice, and key resources. Next up, the Small Business Roundtable discussion featuring the following panelists. Representative Reverend Ivory Thigpen was first elected to the South Carolina House of Representatives in 2016 and currently serves on the Judiciary Committee in the House of Representatives and is the incoming chair of the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus. In addition to his legislative priorities, Reverend Thigpen is also a senior pastor and chiropractic physician. Raquel Richardson Thomas is a serial entrepreneur and owned 5 successful businesses before her 30th birthday. The author, youth volunteer, and college professor is currently the owner of Golden Restaurant in Columbia, South Carolina, and previously owned a retail clothing shop, DMR Fashion. Diane Sumter is the founder and chief executive officer of DISA Incorporated. As an influential business leader, she's concentrated on economic development while leading advocacy efforts for small, women, and minority-owned business enterprises. Lacenta Lewis Ellis is the president and CEO of LLE Construction Group. Lacenta opened her company in 2011 to provide general contracting, project, and construction management, along with several other services, and has expanded her business to the federal marketplace. Courtney Young is the CEO of Foresight Communications, a global strategic marketing firm headquartered in Columbia, South Carolina. Courtney also serves as the liaison for the Board of Directors for NAMC South Carolina and has leadership roles with the Junior League of Columbia and the Gullah Geechee Consortium. Please welcome our panelists for this afternoon's session.
Good afternoon and welcome once again to the 2021 South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus Minority Business Forecast. I'm Trey Taylor, and this is the Small Business Roundtable discussion. Now, Representative Ivory Thigpen is going to join us shortly, but right now, as you heard, we're joined by Raquel Richardson-Thomas and Courtney Young. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having us, Trey.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, ladies, let me start by asking what your outlook is for the overall South Carolina business community and specifically minority business owners. Courtney, I'd like to ask you first. Please unmute yourself.
There we go. I think that the overall outlook is pretty bright. I mean, I think there are lots of opportunities that avail, but more importantly, what I think about business here is there are a ton of training and technical assistance opportunities to prepare small businesses here to do business here and to do business in our neighboring states and throughout the region. So with that, I think that the outlook is strong, and where South Carolina is situated, we have such a great opportunity to be able to connect with our neighbors in Georgia and North Carolina to be able to expand our businesses, and definitely for the minority business community.
Now, Raquel, thank you, Courtney. Raquel, you've owned a few businesses in South Carolina, and of course, you've owned businesses out of the state. What do you think the outlook looks like for South Carolina since you recently, a couple of years ago, moved back to the state?
You know what? I feel just slightly different than Courtney. I think there may be a lot of resources out there, but they're not being communicated effectively. So many small businesses throughout Richland County, throughout South Carolina, aren't aware of the many trainings that may be happening and going on. As a successful business owner here in Columbia, I don't hear about them often. I mean, you have to dig for those resources. So I think one of the things that we have to do a better job of is putting these resources on a platform that's more visible to small business owners, because when you're just starting out or you're in year 1 and year 2, you don't have access to the same thing that business owners like myself and Courtney may have access to. So overall, I think we can do a better job in the state of South Carolina of making the resources more visible for small businesses and most certainly minority businesses.
Yeah. So, Courtney, what do you say to Raquel's point that there are resources available that small minority business owners don't have access to or don't know about?
So I think to the point of knowing about them, I certainly can understand that point. I think that when you are in business, and I mean, I've been in business for 15 years, so I certainly understand and know exactly what it feels like. It wasn't that long ago that I was looking to figure out where people were, where the support was, where that community was to connect with. I think it exists, but I think that there are, so communicating it better, sure, but they exist. I mean, we have, you know, just in the Midlands alone, you have the City of Columbia and their OBO office that is always doing a training. You have the Women's Business Center now at Benedict that's always doing something. So you have engagement opportunities. I think that when you start a business and you go into business, I think that you should get the proper training maybe going in. And I know that sounds, you know, like I've been in business a long time and I just know it, but I think we have to be intentional about how you develop that too. And those resources were not there when I started my business in that way. I mean, the things that you can go to OBO and get technical assistance for, SBDC, the Small Business Development Center, or the Women's Business Center, I think that they have the spaces, and you do have to seek them out. But I think that's in anything. I think it's a mistake to always think it is just going to be sitting right there in front of you, because you have this special thing that you're bringing to the market, and just hanging your shingle isn't enough.
Right.
So I think you have to put that little effort in there.
I want to go ahead and bring in Diane Sumter and Lacenta Ellis because both of those ladies have such a unique opinion and position in this conversation. Lacenta, before I go to Queen Diane Sumter, I want to ask you, being a woman in construction, which is, you know, rare. And I hear some feedback from somebody. I don't know who it is. I think it's from you, Lacenta, because when you went on mute, I heard it again. But what have your specific challenges been?
Can you hear me okay? Okay, yeah. So my challenges, I think, has been most because of the industry that I'm in, the thing that I've just being able to pivot in construction for me has been more of a challenge. Again, the resources, as Courtney and Raquel has commented, the resources are there because we do have the city, the county, even DOT offering programming for small business.
I think we lost Lucenta. All right, Ms. Sumter, can I get you in the conversation, please? Because I know that you often host events, workshops, sessions. I know that you are in the space of really helping smaller minority businesses. Are you having a challenge finding those businesses to get?
Not at all. The key for any business or group is who's your market. Our market is specifically 500,000 and above. Frankly, we have a $40 million client. And once we find that that's the size, then what industries are you really working to work with? Now, during the PPP, we've worked with all businesses, nonprofits, churches, etc. My biggest challenge right now is we've already hired additional staff, is having enough skilled staff to work at the level that the business need. But some of this will have to take responsibility. You know, even the scripture tells you study to prove yourself. I have to study at night, and I tell my businesses, I only learned this last night. So they're gonna have to dig. And there's probably nothing you need that's not on the internet at this time. Then you at least have a beginning base. And for those, some of us aren't on the internet. Frankly, I tell you about a client last week. I got a call from a legislator, went over, picked up his stuff. When I got into my office, he says, I don't know how to hit push to submit his application. He came over to my office, we showed him. Now that's not what we can be doing for everyone, but we can with everyone. So when you ask me, is it out there? Yes, and I absolutely agree. The OBO office under Melissa and Teresa and the mayor and council has been phenomenal. Greg Davis and those do far better at training than they do at helping you to get work. I tell them, don't train me no more. Let me go to work so I can make some money. So when you ask me, is it out there? I will tell you somewhere it's out there. And with the Zooms being nationwide, we've had up to 300 and 400 people on our Zoom that we've had with PPP. We've had with how to do your bookkeeping and your legal structure. We're going to do one on internal structure, etc. So you just have to decide. There's so much need, but we need to keep our mind on what the target is. The target is to identify opportunities, identify financing, and strategically grow the business to being one that's a little larger.
Right. That's Diane Sumter with DISA. Ladies, I want to ask, what do you believe is needed for minority businesses in South Carolina continue surviving in the pandemic? And I see Representative Thigpen has joined us. I'm going to get to you in just a moment, Representative Thigpen. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'll ask you, Courtney.
I think that, we've been talking a lot about the trainings and the technical assistance. Use this time and take advantage of those moments. To Ms. Sumter's point, I think there are more benefits to being a DBE without, even though you may not be getting immediate contracts, which is obviously the goal. Nobody's in business just to hang out. So you want those things, but take advantage of those trainings. Everything that you're seeing right now, if you were not in a position to get PPP early on because you didn't have your books in order, take advantage of those QuickBooks trainings, take advantage of those internal structures and systems and processes, all of those things. I think take advantage of those things now, because when it's time, as we're moving out of this, you won't have the time to spend on that anymore. You got to get back to work. And most of us have stayed at work. Most of us have been fortunate if we did those things early on. It is about planning. It is about being prepared for that process.
Raquel, what about you? And I'm going to come back to your point a little bit later on that you don't think people are getting what they need, especially based on what Courtney and Ms. Sumter said. But I want to know, what do you think is needed for minority businesses in South Carolina to continue surviving within this pandemic, which we hope is wrapping up now?
Well, for me, I think it's easy. I talk to business owners all the time, and 99% of them are saying they need access to capital. And before COVID, that has been a major issue in the minority communities. Access to capital has been difficult long before COVID, and it's become even more difficult during COVID. Courtney mentioned people not having their books in order. That's a common thing with small businesses. That's a common thing with minority businesses. So when we talk about training, I agree there's a lot of training out there. However, these individuals, most of them don't even know where to go to look. So I don't know what we have to do, but I think we have to provide training that's more basic, if that makes sense. We have to teach small business owners, if we desire for them to be successful, we have to teach them where to go to find a resource. Where should you be looking? I know you don't have it right now, and it's possibly out there, and a lot of resources are. I think we have more resources now that COVID has hit, but they really don't know where to look. So it's not as easy to jump on Google and Google business resources in Columbia, South Carolina. You're not going to get a lot of results. And then a lot of it is high level. You have a lot of small business owners that don't have any education. So they need more hands-on training. And they need to be taught where to go to find these tools and resources so that they can use them. But hands down, before COVID, during COVID, having access to capital is a major issue for small businesses across the country.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. Sumter, I want to get you back in here before I bring on Representative Thigpen to Raquel's point. And I know you've been in the game a long time, and you have clients, I'm sure, of all education levels and of various in various industries. How are you able to kind of meet them where they are? Because to Raquel's point, some people are more educated than other people. So, you have different industries. So you say what? How are you able to meet them where they are? If you could take yourself off mute, please. Can you take yourself off mute, please? Can you take yourself off? Or can someone take her? If we can get, I'll do it. Let me see if I can do it. Go ahead. Go right ahead.
Are we unmuted now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we have to meet them where they are. And one of the ways we do that, first thing, I operate the South Carolina Minority Business Development Center that's partially funded by U.S. Department of Commerce. It dictates to us that we have to demonstrate to them that we help businesses get $500 million a year in contracts, similar amount in financing, and that includes bonds and performance and payment bond, or whether we're doing acquisition mergers. So we work with a population, but be mindful that about 5 years ago, a study was done to see where everybody was working so we could see who worked best. And it was decided that the Small Business Development Center was to work with startups. The Women Business Center was working with startups. The cities and counties was working with startups. So MBDA on the national level decided to move us to a different level because someone needed to work with growth businesses so that we could get to where the real dollars are. And to get there, we needed to go to manufacturing, we needed to go to exporting, etc. And they considered it community businesses. And community businesses was one level. Then there was creation of wealth businesses. That was another level. So MBDA moved us to the creation of wealth. Now, I don't know whether any wealth is being created, but that in the end is our long goal. And right now, it's a matter of how do we sustain? How do we move the business from one level to the next? So when you really look at it, everybody has a space. It's a matter of strengthening yourself. And you can't be a business knowing nothing. What you are is just there, present. I tell them all the time, you can't ask to kick you because they're going to kick you. So I'm suggesting that we go back and really visit our businesses to see, are you ready to be in business? There's a tool SBA has out there. Are you ready to be in business? You can't be putting money in the pocket and yet say, I don't have any finances. So there's some things that we are going to have to do as businesses, small business, black business, other business, to be ready to do business. Then we, those business professionals who help businesses, can assess their business, including their financial statements, and begin to work with them to grow the business and identify what training is needed.
Ms. Sumter, we have a question from one of our viewers. They want to know, should the minority business owners that you mentioned pay for this like in some of the other states?
The majority of my clients pay. If I'm working with a business who's making 10 million even, it's a return on their investment, and they'll have to decide of continuing payment. And we have some businesses that we've worked with over 20 years, and that's because I think they'll tell you there's a return on their investment. If we don't give them a return, I want them to go somewhere else. We only want to work with those that we can have an impact, that they can see the result, etc. So yes, the clients do pay. Now, at the same time, you can go to the SBDC at no cost. You can go to the Women Business Center. You can go to the city. You can go to the counties. I tell them, it's a grocery store. After you finish Food Lion, buy loads, etc., then call me. I'm ready because I'm the fresh market.
Thank you. That's Diane Sumter. She's founder and CEO of DISA Incorporated. I'm Trey Taylor. You are watching the 2021 South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus Minority Business Forecast. We are in the small business panel. We're talking to Raquel Richardson Thomas, owner of the Golden Restaurant, also Courtney Young, CEO of Foresight Communications, Diane Sumter, CEO and founder of DISA. Next to her is Representative Ivory Thigpen, District 79 in Richland County. And we've got Lacenta Ellis back with us. She's CEO of LLE Construction Group. Lacenta, since we lost you in the middle of your conversation, I don't know if you want to continue to make your point. Don't even know if you remember what the point was you were making.
Well, yeah, thank you, Trey. No, I was just you asked me, I guess, what's the climate for small businesses, and I think Ms. Sumter, Raquel, and Courtney pretty much hit it dead on. A lot of small businesses we're struggling, and COVID just made it just a tad bit harder to access capital. But one thing that we learned coming out of that is that we have to have those banking relationships, and we have to have accountability with our financials and our books, and make sure that we have those in order so that we can apply for like the PPP and even the second round. So I think they covered a lot of what small business owners just have been struggling with. There are resources out here, and we just have to go and get the assistance that we need. And I totally agree with what they've said so far.
Well, we have a question. Are smaller banks able to help minority-owned businesses work through the loans, the process of the PPP loans? The other question was, there are barbers that qualify for these loans, but are having a hard time filling out the paperwork, similar to what you said, Courtney, not having their paperwork in order. So are smaller banks able to help better than some of the Wells Fargo's, First Citizens, Bank of America's?
Well, I guess I'm gonna comment on it. I won't say, well, small business, as long as they're able to do the PPP, because all banks are not assisting with the PPP, they are able. Like, we use First Horizon, and they sat with me and walked me through the process. But I will say too, I have a CPA who also helped me with the second round of the PPP, and knowing what information was needed and making sure that I had all the information. Go ahead.
Can I chime in on that too?
Yes, ma'am.
First and foremost, the PPP has just been extended by 2 months. So instead of March 31st, May is now, it's open until May. The reason it was opened for the further time is because there was many who had not gotten in, and many of the bank's portals has ceased. But I would suggest to any business, get you a banking relationship, not a bank teller. So that when you call them, they do one thing, that's respond. Because if you're looking for payroll, you don't need to get them next week. You need to get them now. But at the same time, Optus Bank has been phenomenal. And we have partnered with them. And I have a person at my office who you can call and help walk them through it. Now, they must push the button. And the rules change. For those who have a Schedule C line, who's an LLC, for Schedule C, line 31 was what was. Now it's line 7. It's gone back to revenue. So many of those who were not eligible Now, for those who are PP2, you have to have 25% reduction on any quarter. And we've been very, very successful. And Optus Bank has been a Trojan in doing it. But if you still have someone who needs to get PPP, if they'll call me, I will absolutely help them find, not only help them get it done, but find them somebody to process it, because we now have until May 31st.
Yeah. Can you give your contact information, Diane, for people who may want to contact you?
Well, everybody else seems to have it. It's 803-730-6466. Now, I won't be doing it, but I'll get them to the person. But it's 803-730-6466. We don't want anyone to not get PPP because they don't have access. Now, for the first round, they need the 2019 tax return if they didn't get it. And then for the second round, it's based on quarter reduction of 25%.
Reverend Representative Thigpen, I want to get you in here for a minute. District 79, Richland County, as a small business owner yourself and state representative, does there need to be a disparity study in South Carolina? So several other places have had it.
I definitely agree that there needs to be one. The reality of it is that there are disparities. I am a business owner in several senses, as really a pastor of a church, a nonprofit, the headmaster of a child care development center, as well as the owner of a chiropractic clinic and wellness center. You know, those are three different types of businesses, unique each, but all still struggling and having difficulties during this time. And to be quite honest, even before this time, you know, African American and minority businesses are challenged to access capital. You know, I won't belabor us with the horror story of my wonderful and well-detailed business plan that got rejected by so many banks. But what I will say to the illustrious Miss Diane Sumter's points, as she has made so many drop the mic moments, you know, it's really about relationships that you have with the bank, and you have to build relationships, and you also have to leverage relationships. We were able in all three businesses to get PPP and in some instances economic injury money, both first and second rounds. But it really boiled down to the relationship with the bank. We applied to probably about 4 different banks. And, you know, I'm exaggerating now, but they wanted our firstborn and a blood sample. And the process was very, very closed window. And it seemed as though it was people knew when to and how to get there and get to the front of the line. And, you know, luckily, we were blessed to have a relationship with a small credit union that was able to really walk us along the process and facilitate it for us. And really what everyone has said, that it's really about relationships. You know, it's really about having your books in order, because you can have the best of relationships, but if you don't have your books in order, you're not going to get access, because nobody's going to give you money that they think that's going to ultimately cause problems from them, or you're going to have problems repaying. So I know there are a lot of people who are what I would call entrepreneurs or self-employed, probably is a better word, but aren't necessarily where they need to be on having their books in order, as well as having the information that they need to access of these various sources and resources. You know, I don't even pretend to be as well versed as some of the others who have mentioned, you know, the intricate details about, you know, what line and where you need to go and what percentage you need to have. But there are people out there who know it. So if you are in a situation like myself and you cannot be the master of all things, you need to connect yourself with someone that can indeed and is knowledgeable about how you complete these processes and access this. And so I want to say this one last thing, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Ms. Taylor. You know, I thought Ms. Sumter made an excellent point about, you know, and it's something that I've actually brought up with the South Carolina Commission on Minority Affairs, is that so many times we focus on the incubators and the startup businesses, but there are so many businesses that have already opened their doors, that have already began to do business, that need this assistance. And so one of the questions that I frequently ask is how are we identifying those businesses in the community? What bridges are we building so that current businesses that employ and do commerce and bring economic activity into our communities, how are they being helped and assisted to become stronger business? Because it's not just about starting business, it's about making strong businesses in our community. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Representative Ivory Thigpen, District 79. We have got about 10 or so more minutes. I tell you, time flies when you're talking about important issues. And I do want to ask you all some things that you can suggest that right now minority business owners need to do: programs, events, activities, resources. But before that, I want to ask you, each of you that are small business owners, and Lacenta, I'd like to start with you. What challenges have you faced and how have you overcome them, so that perhaps that can be some great advice for another small or minority business owner?
Okay, thanks, Trey. So some of the challenges that I initially faced, of course, has been, access to capital. When you start your business, you have the resource. I had the resources to open the office, but a lot of times you have to fund we have to fund our project. So that was the biggest challenge for me coming off of unemployment and starting my business, was just having the resources available to grow my business. And then the other thing I think is building my capabilities. So as a small business owner, when I first started, I just couldn't hire the staff right off the bat to be help for me in the beginning. So I noticed, even as my business began to grow, and once it hit a certain mark, I need a great team around me, not just my subcontractors, but in-house. So building the capacity and our capabilities require me, to build my team. And Trey, I would just want to touch real quick on the disparity study that you asked earlier. I truly believe that we need disparity studies, because we need to see in our city, our county and state procurement, even federal government, we really need to see where are minorities getting the business, and what type of participation are these different entities, tracking to make sure that contracting opportunities are available for small women and minority contractors. So just to answer your question, absolutely, we need a disparity study completed. I think the city of Columbia just had an RFP out to actually complete a disparity study, so that we can establish more programs that allow more contracting opportunities for our small women and minority contractors. Thank you, Trey.
Thank you, Lacenta. Raquel? Challenges and how you've overcome them, so that someone else can perhaps glean from your experience?
Well, we definitely need a disparity study. I couldn't be more in agreement with Lacenta. And it's different for different businesses. Understand that. I own a restaurant and it operates a lot different than everybody else's business on the panel today. So it depends on industry. Industry is huge when it comes to research and data, and resources for that matter. Challenges for me, and I'll start from more of a political standpoint. Hiring is very difficult here. Hiring staff that show up to work on time. I think we have a lot of people looking for jobs, but more people looking for a paycheck versus a job. So hiring has been an uphill battle overall during my time operating a business here in South Carolina. I also say a challenge can sometimes be the lack of support in your own community. We oftentimes spend more dollars in other people's community than we do in our own. And this is like something that a lot of us may not want to touch, but we need to talk about it more, because we cripple ourselves. We don't have enough support from our own people in our own communities, where we spend a mass amount of dollars in other people's communities. So that's a huge issue across the board in the African American community alone. And then again, not as political, but I think we have to have the difficult conversations to be better. We often operate in a crab mentality amongst ourselves. So we have to do a better job of working together. We have to do a better job of supporting each other and coming together as one. We are a mighty fist if we work together, but we struggle when we work individually. But the key, I think, Trey, to all the challenges I just mentioned is building your all-star team. Everything circles back to the team, the people that sit to the left of you, the right of you. You have to build an all-star team to be successful, not just in this market, but in any market.
Yeah, thank you, Raquel. Courtney, was there one thing that you had to overcome that you can share that you were able to give some really great advice about?
I think building a community around you, just to further Raquel's point. Early in my business, and for a long time, it was just me. It was me figuring out, me coming up with ideas, me pitching the clients, me managing the work. And even as I hired people and my team has grown, and I'm grateful for a quality team of individuals that I work with, building a community around me that could support telling me yes and no when I needed no's and I was going too far, and giving me advice in ways that would help guide me on the path the vision I saw in the path I could go. But one of the things that I will always credit to being a game changer in my business was, well, two things. One, my personal SWOT. Anybody that knows me knows I believe in a SWOT analysis: your strength, your weaknesses, opportunities and threats. I had to check myself. What was going to work, what wasn't going to work, who was for me, who was against me, all of those things.
That's good.
And the next thing was getting certified. We didn't have a chance to talk about that much, but businesses numbers count. It's why disparity studies are important. It's why all of these minority business communities and organizations exist, it's because the numbers matter. So people need to get certified. If you are a minority business owner, it doesn't always mean you need to be just DBE or just MBE or just women-owned small business, but find one. Get into a community of people, because that's where you'll begin to also develop a network that can keep supporting you as you're going through this process. When you're missing it, they're hearing it and they're sharing it. And it doesn't always mean it's going to get you that particular contract, but it'll help build that network. And so those were game changers for me.
Yeah, great advice. Those are great takeaways, because you've got to know who you are, like you said, what your strengths and weaknesses are, what you can do, what you can't do. But if you don't know, you got to have somebody around you who can tell you.
Yeah.
So
you need some balance.
Yeah, briefly, tell us a little bit about Foresight Communications, what you do.
So at Foresight, we are in the business of marketing and public relations, and we do public outreach. So we do public outreach for cities, counties, states. We do it for federal projects as well. We spend a lot of time in the transportation arena. We're into healthcare. So we work with these agencies to get the word out. So I hear you, Raquel. I hear you very well on getting the word out, because it's a challenge, but we work with them to get the word out about what they're doing. And so that's the majority of what we do in those spaces.
Great.
And sometimes making sure they know they need a budget to do it, because they don't always commit to the outreach part as much as they do the technical assistance. So
right. That's Courtney Young, CEO of Foresight Communications. Diane Sumter, founder and CEO of DISA. What programs, events, activities you suggest minority business participate in? What do minority businesses have to do, Ms. Sumter?
I want to switch a little bit. I think our basic issue is getting opportunities. Yes, we need training, but what we need is opportunities. And if we look at what the legislative body can do, we can assure that the state dollars, the federal dollars, the municipality dollars, we have some access to those. Then if we get those dollars, we'll be able to go to the restaurants and other places. So I really want us to think about, how do we go about increasing and assuring money is being spent every day? But we look at our state and municipal, it's going out of state. So if you must send our money away, at least insist that they include us. So that's sort of mine. And when you talk about a challenge, those are opportunities. It's opportunities for the legislators to step to the plate and see that the state do another disparity study. There were 3 disparity studies done 20 years ago. I'm so fortunate and so happy that the city is doing another one, but the county hasn't, and the state had the gall for the SCDOT to decide that they weren't going to even accept it because they didn't send it to their board. And why we need a disparity study? Because Justice O'Connor said after the Adirondack Act that was the only way to do goals, etc. So I'm pleading with Representative Thigpen. Look at what we really need. Do we need training? Yes, but we need business.
Right. Well, to your point, thank you, Ms. Sumter. And I was going to ask Representative Thigpen, but Diane Sumter asked the question, Representative Thigpen. So what can you all do up at the big house, at the State House? What can you do? Look, and I said this in one of the last panels, in the words of the great Janet Jackson, what have you done for us lately? And what can you do for small minority and women-owned businesses? What can you all do to make sure, as Ms. Sumter said, that folks are getting these dollars?
Well, I think,
go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, I think part of it is exactly what we're doing right now, having, such women as these and business owners such as these raise awareness and begin to put a spotlight on them as far as what they're doing. Because one of the things you have to realize, it is political pressure. Awareness is really what changes the temperature. One of the things that I want to bring quickly to our attention, that even though the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus may be the largest, in the country, we still are a vast minority in the legislative body. So then how do we put the pressure on the rest of the body to act on what we know is urgent and a major issue? One small step is a study, but we can't stop at a study, because we know the study is just highlighting or bringing awareness to what the problem is. Then we have to insist upon there be action taken, because to have diversity is one thing, but if there's not inclusion, if there's not access to opportunity, it doesn't make a difference. So I think the thing that we failed to do is be intentional. I mean, we can't just simply say we put it out there, you get it if you want it, you get to it if you can. I think we have to be intentional about the inclusion and the opportunities that we provide and ensure take place for our minority contractors, for minority businesses. So definitely it is an uphill battle, but I don't want to underestimate or under promote what we're doing here, because I do think, and I know people who have been listened in, have been helped by this panel. And we got to do our part. I think part of it begins with what Ms. Thomas highlighted on, because what she talked about, community and crab-like mentality and supporting one another, is not unique to the restaurant business. It happens amongst legislators, that we have to stand as one. We have to operate with collective power, because that's the only way we really can bargain. That's the only way we really can address issues, because there are so many fights that sometimes we just have to pick a few and not take them all on. And we have to make sure that we have measurable outcomes and benchmarks for what we're trying to do. We can't just simply shoot in the dark. So I'm overly analytical, so I love to be data driven. I think we need studies, and not just simply studies that, because sometimes what happens, let me say this and then I'll close. Sometimes we do studies and then they become paperweights and bookshelf.
And I was going to say that.
And we take the information and we do nothing with it. It almost as if the studies sometimes are pacifiers. We put committees together and we put projects together just simply to quiet the people, so that we can, and I say we, because I'm speaking collectively for the legislative body, although I'm not the powers that be that pull the levers. But we do that just to quiet down the people, but we can't be quiet. And that's why I call and bring it all the way back to, we got to have and raise such a fuss, right, that we don't let it die. And then that gives us the opportunity to really put pressure to say, hey, no, you just can't push this in the corner or do a study and forget about it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I was going to make that point too, Representative Thigpen. It's one thing, to Ms. Sumter's point, to have a study. It's another thing to do something about the study once you have the study, because I'm sure there are all kinds of studies going on and nothing has happened from that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your taking this time and sharing your thoughts. And I do hope that this is part of a bigger conversation that needs to happen, because and with all due respect, Representative Thigpen, you all are our representatives. You're our senators. You're the people that are supposed to be our advocates. And there are some great things happening, but still so much more has to happen. And it has to be the communication. Small business owners have to feel comfortable enough and know who their representatives are to communicate with them, tell them what their needs are, and then in turn, you all need to let us know what can be done, and make sure, like Ms. Sumter says, that money is coming into the Black and Brown communities. Thank you all so much again for joining us. Representative Ivory Thigpen, District 79, Richland County. Also, Lacenta Ellis, CEO of LLE Construction Group, and Raquel Richardson Thomas, owner of the Golden Restaurant. Courtney Young, with CEO of Foresight Communications, and Queen Diane Sumter, founder and CEO of DISA Incorporated. Thank you all so much for joining us today for the 2021 South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus Minority Business Forecast. Thank you also for watching. Please continue to post and share this information out, because this is such an important conversation, such great tips, such great information that we know you need to hear, and someone else does too. Coming up next, USNSC economics and what it means for minority business. That's our next and final panel this afternoon as we continue with the Minority Business Forecast from the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus. I'm Trey Taylor. Thank you all again.
The South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus was founded in 1975 with the mission to improve the quality of life for Black and minority communities in South Carolina. Since its founding under the leadership of Judge Ernest Finney Jr., the caucus has been the catalyst behind significant legislative action and policy changes in South Carolina that brought efforts of justice and fairness for all South Carolinians. Caucus efforts have led to state statute requiring consideration of minority businesses in the process of awarding state contracts, the creation of the Governor's Office for Small and Minority Businesses, the South Carolina Commission of Minority Affairs, and the state's Human Affairs Commission. The caucus is currently comprised of 45 members, including 12 state senators and 33 members of the South Carolina House of Representatives. In January 2021, State Representative Patricia Hennigan assumed the role of chair of the caucus, marking the third woman to be elected to lead the historic organization. Chair Hennigan has announced an active and comprehensive plan for the caucus that centers on increasing overall exposure and opportunities for minority communities across South Carolina. The South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus remains committed to its founding motto: like limbs, we reach toward the sun, but feed from a common root. The caucus remains readily available to serve the citizens of South Carolina, continuously fighting for justice and fairness.
The doctor, a living legend.
Hello, this is Julius Dr. J. Irvin. One thing I have in common with some of the other Hall of Famers, we were never afraid to take the big shot.
West throws it up.
And today is no different.
Good.
I'm getting vaccinated for my family, friends, and community. Let's do this together. For more information on the vaccine, visit cdc.gov.
Are COVID restrictions stopping you from getting your music fix? No worries. 7th Sunday is bringing the only live themed music experience in the Carolinas right to your living room. Tune in to watch Fox 57 Saturdays for a special midnight airing of 7th Sunday featuring some of the most talented musicians from South Carolina and beyond. Stay safe. You don't want to miss it.
Thank you for joining us for the final session in this afternoon's 2020 South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus Minority Business Forecast. Please tag, post, and share this informative conversation filled with important information, valuable advice, and key resources. Our final roundtable discussion today, USNSC. economics, and what it means for minority business. Featuring attorney Bakari Sellers with Strom Law Firm, the CNN commentator made history in 2006, becoming the youngest African American ever elected in office at the age of 22 to the South Carolina House of Representatives. Senator Gerald Malloy was elected to the South Carolina Senate in 2002 and has won every election since. Senator Malloy currently serves on several committees, including banking and insurance, education, ethics, legislative oversight, and rules and transportation. Senator Malloy is also an attorney and owns the Malloy Law Firm in Hartsville, South Carolina. Frank Knapp is the president and CEO of the South Carolina Small Business Chamber of Commerce. He currently serves on the board of directors of the American Sustainable Business Council and co-chair of Small Business for America's Future. Dr. Dolores DaCosta is the executive director for the South Carolina Commission for Minority Affairs. Dr. DaCosta has over 20 years of experience in federal policies and regulations and previously served as the regional director for U.S. Senator Tim Scott. Representative Justin Bamberg was elected to the South Carolina House of Representatives in 2014 and has won every election since. Representative Bamberg currently serves on the Ethics and Judiciary Committee in the House of Representatives. Along with being an elected official, Representative Bamberg is a nationally recognized attorney and founded Bamberg Legal LLC in 2016. Dr. Joseph Jackson is the executive director of the USDOT Small Business Transportation Resource Center, Mid-South Atlantic Resource Center. Dr. Jackson also serves as the president and CEO of the Greater Atlanta Economic Alliance, which is a 501c3 nonprofit aimed to increase capacity and the capabilities of the small, female, and minority business enterprise as it relates to the transportation and construction industries. Please welcome our panelists for this final session this afternoon.
Cannot hear you.
All right. I apologize. Thank you, Frank. I want to thank everyone for joining us again for the 2021 Minority Business Forecast. My name is Trey Taylor. Please continue to post and share this information out because we've been having such great conversations today, and I'm sure this will be another one. I want to start today with a topic that we've talked about a couple of times in some previous panels, and that is a disparity study. Some of our neighbors have taken the steps to study the level of participation with DBEs and minority businesses within their state. Does South Carolina need a comprehensive disparity study? Bakari, I want to start with you. I know you've got to leave us early, so what do you think?
I was trying to unmute myself.
I think you're muted, though.
Yes. You study. But it's along the lines, and I know Senator Malloy knows this very well, probably better than most because he's doing the work. But we need this study to be done along not just our economic institutions, but also amongst public education, healthcare, and the list goes on and on and on. And I think that while we're talking about disparities amongst race in South Carolina, we also must talk about disparities between urban and rural, because many times the discussion about rural South Carolina, again, I hate to pick on my good friend, Senator Malloy, but he knows the plight that many rural South Carolinians face every day. So to answer your question bluntly, Trey, yes, we have to be willing to dig in, do the work, do the research necessary to bolster the claims that many of us make on a daily basis.
Senator Malloy, Bakari said that you're in the vineyards doing the work, and you certainly are and have been for quite some time. What do you think about this disparity study? And can you unmute yourself, please? Can you unmute yourself, please? I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I think that obviously the disparities are tremendous. I think that if you look at our state population as to what it is, and probably 27, 28% African American. And I agree with Mr. Sellers when he said that it's urban and rural. What we have is that the influx of people in our state, what we're seeing now in South Carolina, is we're up to about 5.2 million people. The coronavirus that we've had in recent times has had a tremendous impact upon people of color because of health disparities. As we continue to go down the road to for the recovery, we continue to face with challenges with the vaccine that will end up promoting us on the economic return to recovery. And so, what does it affect? Well, it affects colleges and universities. The people that were hit pretty hard were the first line.
We lost him again. We lost his audio. We can't hear you, Senator Malloy. Senator Malloy, we can't hear you. While Senator Malloy is, are you back with us, Senator Malloy? I'll ask Dr. DaCosta about her opinion about the disparity study. You are executive director of the South Carolina Commission for Minority Affairs. What do you think about a disparity study? Do we need that in South Carolina?
I agree that we do need a disparity study, but I also agree with Bakari that it has to be more than just business. At the commission, we look at disparities in healthcare, education, housing, across the board, because you cannot focus on one area and leave the others out. So therefore, it has to be a comprehensive study that also includes recommendations as well as action items on how we're going to fulfill the discrepancies that we find in this study.
And Mr. Knapp, who would pay for that? Who do you think should pay for that disparity study? Whose responsibility is that?
Well, you've asked the wrong person on this panel. Since I don't work for the state, Joe and Bakari and I have nothing to do with how things are funded here. That's more of a question for Dolores and
well, but I'm sure you have an opinion. I'm sure you have an opinion as to who should pay for it.
A study like this is going to be paid by the state, one way or another. If we're going to do it, the state's got to pay for it. And while it's a very worthwhile study, I tell you what, I'm very much more interested in is getting more small businesses minority owned in rural areas. I think we need to put a lot of emphasis on that. I hate to wait for studies that may take a year, and we've wasted a year when we know what we need to do.
Bakari, do you have a comment about that? Should the state pay for it? And where do you get the money if the state pays for it?
I think, if we're waiting on the state to pay for it, then my twins will be going to college by then. I think that we have to explore various public-private partnerships. I think that you'll see in places like Charleston and Greenville, maybe even Florence, where there is a growth focus, maybe Orangeburg, they will partner with universities in their area, the Benedicts of the world. They'll partner with the USC's Schools of Public Policy, in Charleston, maybe MUSC, to do this work. But the work needs to be done. I just don't think that the state puts enough emphasis on the value of diversity. I appreciate the question, Trey, but I think that we have to go back and kind of reverse engineer it. And I think on this one, I think both Dr. DaCosta and Joe Jackson would agree with me that we have to actually see, and we work and live and play and build businesses in a state that doesn't necessarily value diversity. And so the question is, first, how do we get a value proposition placed on this before we can even take these steps to utilize resources to both diagnose the problem we know exists and then to build out from there? Frank talks about bringing these small businesses to our rural areas, and that is a part of the panacea. That is a part of the cure. The question is, again, Frank knows the answer to this, but how do we get them there? And how do we get the resources to get them there is even a better question.
Well, what about private companies? Are we the state that can get some private companies like in other states have done to pay for this study? Bakari, I'm going to go back to you. I know you have to, leave the panel soon. So,
man, my wife needs this mute button. I know whoever's running the mute button backstage, my wife is going to ask you for this because it's doing a good job.
I'm muting you.
Ask y'all how she can keep me from talking so much at the house. She gonna invest in this. Again, I think that we're advocating our duty as a state, but yes, I do think that, and this is part of the genius that is, the Gerald Malloys of the world, the Hugh Leathermans of the world, et cetera, because they can tie this into a tax package or whatever to recruit the next Amazon or Boeing to our state. But again, I think that we have to kind of look at this holistically. Frank said it. I mean, small businesses are the lifebloods of our community. I mean, they're the backbone of the American economy. We shouldn't have to wait for a large company. We should do everything we can to create the environment for these small businesses to flourish and thrive, and for particularly African-American women, and Dr. DaCosta can piggyback on this, who we know are the fastest growing sector of small businesses in the country, to get the resources they need, particularly after COVID, to grow those businesses.
Joe Jackson, the National Association of Minority Contractors, I want to get you in the conversation. Should business pay for it?
Yeah, well, that was a typo earlier, but you since corrected. I'm with the USDOT Mid-South Atlantic Resource Center. But to your point, and listening to everyone, the key question is why, why are disparity studies important and why do they exist? So obviously we're having this compelling conversation because we obviously know that there's some type of, disparity that exists. So in order to, first of all, defend a disparity study and to set goals for a disparity study. So if we see that there's a disparity for a certain market area availability for minority businesses, in order to stipulate those goals and to ask for that request, we have to have a disparity study that will constitutionally defend us from any lawsuits or et cetera. So just to share with you, I'm happy to work with a lot of DOTs throughout the country, and specifically with Georgia DOT, South Carolina DOT, and Tennessee DOT, which is in my Mid-South Atlantic region. And SCDOT is required to administer a statewide disparity study every so often in lieu of their federal dollars. So just to share with you as well, SCDOT has a disparity study, so they've already paid for it, and most agencies are able to build on to those disparities with a market area availability. But to Dr. Siller's point and others' point, yeah, there are other areas that the DOT may not encompass from an industry, so you can build onto it from a statewide to look at your rural areas or other manufacturing areas or industries that disparities exist. But in order to first identify the anecdotal data and evidence that there is testimony, that there are discrimination in contracting opportunities, et cetera, a disparity study must be done to defend those goals, both race conscious and race neutral. So therefore you can stipulate those goals into a contract. So I would, encourage everyone to look at your state DOT, and DOT was at the forefront of many, many lawsuits many, many years ago that has provided the constitutionality behind disparity studies from Adirondack, et cetera, years ago. So every DOT who receives federal dollars are required to administer a disparity study. So outside of the state who funnels federal funds into transportation, you also have your local municipalities who also receive federal dollars for roads and bridges and T-SPLOST, and they normally follow the DOT disparity study. So I would challenge everyone to review your current disparity study and to see how you can build upon it.
All right, thank you. That's Joe Jackson with USDOT. Dr. DaCosta, so once, if, and when there is a disparity study in South Carolina, how do we make sure then something is done?
Well, for one, the commission is not going to wait for the study. We have to be proactive right now. We have to be able to make sure that resources are available, as well as the kinds of assistance our folks need, particularly in the small business industry. Right now, we are partnering with folks across the board, small business development centers, women business development centers. We are partnering with DOT, other government agencies, to try and come up with a plan that will work to get more small minority businesses to do business with the state. The study will come, and I know DOT has one. I have not reviewed it, but I will take a look at what it says. But we can't wait for the study. The time is now. We have to strike now, and that's what the commission's trying to do. Build an organization filled with private-public partnerships to make sure that small businesses all have the same opportunities to succeed in business.
Thank you. That is Dr. Dolores DaCosta, Executive Director for the South Carolina Commission for Minority Affairs. Mr. Jackson, I want to come back to you because we have a question from one of our viewers. I want to make sure you answer the question. They're saying, should South Carolina businesses, the top Black businesses, pay for the study?
Yes, well, once again, to Dr. DaCosta's point, I would encourage everyone to review the current study that's already available. So the state has already paid for your required state DOT disparity study that's required by every DOT mode throughout the United States. Everyone is required to do a statewide disparity study. In addition, because there are other certified DBEs from other states, in most cases it touches and concerns the surrounding states. So the disparity study is a very robust disparity study, and it shares with you the current lacking market area availability of men and women who are identified, but unfortunately they are not getting contracts. In addition, the disparity study already shows the anecdotal data that has been administered throughout the states to justify the disparity study based on the testimony that discrimination still in the contracting process. So in order to have a disparity study, the state hired a disparity agent who went out and administered the study from anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000. That's the going rate for a statewide disparity study. It's already been paid for. It's only good for 4 to 5 years before it sunsets, and you have to do the other disparity study. So it's real data. So you can look at your current disparity study that's already been administered and identify certain industries that may not be associated, and you can hopefully build on to those areas. One thing we like to say in the DOT buys a lot. So a lot of people may not think that there are certain industries that are represented within the disparity study, but you would be surprised of what DOT buys and the industries that are already in the disparity study.
That's Joe Jackson with the USDOT. Thank you for joining us for the 2021 Minority Business Forecast. I'm Trey Taylor, and this is brought to you by the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus. We also have with us Senator Gerald Malloy from District 29, Attorney Bakari Sellers, who is also a CNN analyst, and he's got to leave in just a couple of minutes. Also, Dr. Dolores DaCosta, Executive Director for the South Carolina Commission of Minority Affairs, and Frank Knapp, President and CEO of the South Carolina Small Business Chamber of Commerce. All right, so what is your outlook, Frank? I'll start with you for the overall U.S. economy and specifically South Carolina business economy. What does it look like to you?
Well, I think everybody's very optimistic. I think with the new administration getting the COVID under control, there's a lot of pent up demand for moving forward. I think we're going to see a robust economy. And that's why you have all the people on Wall Street worried about inflation. But I'm looking forward to that. I think South Carolina is going to do well also. But the problem is just because a lot of the economy is doing well doesn't mean all of the economy is doing well. And we know what's going to happen. We know what happened during the pandemic. There were more minority business owners that went out of business than everybody else. We've been knocked way down in our minority small businesses, and so we have a lot of room to catch up. And my question then is, what are we going to do that? Where are we going to find the resources? I know there's not much at the state level, but we ought to be looking at the federal level. We ought to be looking at how access to capital it can be made more available for our rural underserved communities. And if we continue to rely on banks and financial institutions or big corporations to do something, that's what we've been doing for 40 years. We need to be taking control of the government that we have and the resources we have to get that capital to the rural underserved communities and minorities and women business owners to really jumpstart them and get this going. And that will play into a robust economic recovery.
Senator Malloy, Frank Knapp says that there are no resources, there are not enough resources at the state level. Are we able to get the resources from the state level to filter down into our rural communities, particularly for our minority and small businesses? We still can't hear you, Senator Malloy. I don't see that your mic is muted, but we still cannot hear you. I'm not sure why. Yeah. Can I suggest, can you log off and then log back on? Can you try that? That may help. Thank you so much. Bakari, I want to get you in here before you leave with the same question. Where, if the funds, as Frank said, are not at the state level, first of all, are they at the state level? And how do we get them to trickle down to our cities and communities?
So first, I mean, I probably should have said this from the beginning, but to Joe Jackson, Dolores DaCosta, Frank Knapp, and of course you, Trey, and the Legislative Black Caucus, just thank you so much. This is probably my last question I'll be able to stick around for. But let me answer it two ways. The outlook is great, as Frank said, because of the stimulus package, and it does include $350 billion, if I'm not mistaken, for state and local governments. And so there are going to be funds that are made available to the state of South Carolina in the form of a block grant. And so the question is, how is our legislature, when they stop debating open carry and abortion, how do they get around to figuring out the formulas so that this gets to the people it needs to get to? But look, small businesses and, the economy of South Carolina is going to flourish. It's not because of the $1,400 stimulus checks that people are going to get this weekend. But Trey, this is the first time in American history that we're taking direct aim at backbreaking generational poverty. Beginning in July, individuals are going to receive $500 to $600 a month for the rest of the year as a refundable child tax credit. I mean, this has never been done before. The average family, 85% of the families in this country are going to receive $14,000. And we're talking about the lower part of the K. When you talk about a recovery, we're talking about the bottom half of the K. And so this is going to fundamentally change individuals. This isn't even including the rental assistance, et cetera. But this is going to change the buying power. This is going to change the outlook of our economy. So I'm looking forward to much better days. And maybe even one day where we get a universal basic income, which is a whole nother conversation, where we can really stimulate growth. So thank you guys for having me, and continue to have a blessed weekend.
Thank you so much, Bakari. We appreciate you. Senator Malloy, can you say something? Let's see if we can hear you now.
Hello?
All righty. You're cooking with audio.
Okay, well, finally. So I would go back to the beginning about the disparity study. I just want to say one is that we have enough studies and enough committees. Basically, what we do know is that we have an increased population around our state. We have 27% people of color. We have an influx of population that's coming in. The General Assembly has dealt with a lot of things as it relates to CARES Act funding with the minority money that we had set aside, the vaccines that are going on, dealing with businesses, and a lot of questions as to how the pandemic has been handled. Having said that, I think we've talked about it enough. We know that there is some disparities. And I'm not certain if someone said anything about the fact that a study sort of backs up and sort of substantiates what we already know. I think the General Assembly has a real responsibility to look at our state, the division that we have in our state, where we have about 6 counties that take up about half of our population, with an influx of people that's coming in from a lot of urban areas. And we got some real winners and losers on a lot of these matters as it relates to it. You know, for example, universities are having a very difficult time because of online learning and those kinds of things. What we have to end up knowing now is this, is that the expected revenue in our area is better than our sister states. I have some data that we end up having that our decline in percent pre-COVID-19 revenue projections was like 1% for 2020 and expected to be only 7% in 2021. And so what does that mean going forward? Let's see how we're able to use the resources that come in from the package that's coming in from the federal government. Are we going to be able to end up handling broadband and those issues that are really needed in our area? What are we going to do is to end up connecting the divide in the educational aspect that we have when we've had children that have not been in schools, that have been trying to learn through and by the internet services. As you see, I'm having some problems right here in my office. And basically, if someone has already addressed it, you know, I apologize, but the vaccine that we're trying to end up getting to get our economy going back, to make sure that we can end up having enough resources for there to tie some of these funds over to end up helping minority businesses, people, women in businesses, and to make certain that folks have access to the resources that we end up having. And so our responsibility is to make certain that we adhere to the definitions of politics. It's about how we establish priorities. And priorities has to be for our entire state, just not for part of it.
That's Senator Gerald Malloy. I want to ask you, Mr. Costa, what do you believe is needed for minority businesses in South Carolina to continue surviving in the pandemic? And what do you think they need to recover? Please unmute your mic.
All right. Done. I'm going to have to agree with Diane Sumter when she made the comment that, first of all, folks need to decide if they really want to be in business. That's the first hurdle. Because if you really want to be in business, then it is going to be the responsibility of that business owner to help us find the right solutions to help them. I believe that if they become a part of the solution, they would appreciate the results a whole lot more. Throwing money at a failing business will not work if we do not help them with their infrastructure. And that's not just your new starts. The new starts, you can train them from the beginning. Those who are already in business, we need to find ways to provide the kind of technical assistance that they may need to move forward. How do we help them become resilient? One way, you have to have a plan A, B, and C to be in business. You have to be able to bounce back. And to do that, you have to think outside of the box. You have to be creative and allow yourself to take the risk in order to bring your business back to life. I've been working with the minority businesses since COVID. We were responsible for disseminating $40 million to minority business owners. We received over 9,000 applications for this $40 million. Of the 9,000, maybe 2,200 were African-American owned businesses.
Wow.
The bulk of the businesses did not receive grant funding because of minor things such as not having a plan, not knowing how to manage a bank account, not filing taxes, things of that nature. Those are the basic things that business owners need to understand if they want the financial institutions to take them seriously. When the CARES Act came out last June, a lot of small businesses were turned away because, and I think it was said in one of the previous panels, relationships. They had no banking relationships. So banks were not going to take the risk of lending money because they don't know the history of that business owner. Those are the kinds of things that my commission is working on right now, along with the Small Business Development Centers, SCORE, we are SBA. We are partnering with all of these folks because we need to come up with a comprehensive plan to help strengthen these businesses so that the next time funds are available, they will be able to stand on their own status, being a strong, viable business in this state. And that's where we are headed with this. We can pour as much money as we want to into a business. It's like giving a poor person $1 million. If they never learn how to manage that $1 million, they're going to be broken and very quickly.
All right, that's Dr. Dolores DaCosta, Executive Director for the South Carolina Commission for Minority Affairs. Joe Jackson with the USDOT. I want to ask you this question, please. How competitive are South Carolina's DBEs and minority and small businesses in comparison to our neighboring states?
Well, this is something so often I try to make sure that we have our pulse on, since we deal with both Georgia, South Carolina, and Tennessee. We have probably just about a similar amount of certified DBEs. Okay, we have DBEs respectively for South Carolina. We have DBEs who are certified with SCDOT, and they're in South Carolina, and we have DBEs who are certified and they lived in their home state of Tennessee and Georgia, but they're certified in South Carolina. And some have been successful in doing business in South Carolina, and vice versa. Various businesses from South Carolina has been successful in doing business in other states as well. So what I would add is I'm happy to hear that the USDOT has interstate certification. So no longer is the certification process an administrative burden. So if someone's in South Carolina and they're seeking to do business in Georgia or in Tennessee, all they have to do is contact the State B DOT, and the State B DOT will utilize their certification from their home state in South Carolina. So I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that that administrative burden has been removed. So therefore, firms can partner with one another. So to your question, one thing I would highly advocate is that businesses begin to increase their capacity and to scale their business and partner with one another. I've heard so often, a lot of our panelists have said we cannot wait for studies, right? We cannot wait for joint ventures or other programs to be assessed in a contract. So I challenge businesses to begin to partner amongst themselves so they can increase their capacity, and combined, they could probably go after a larger project in Georgia or Tennessee or South Carolina. So as it relates to the state, I'm very optimistic that all three states have a robust transportation plan and the dollars will begin to flow. And this is why I want to just insert back to the importance of a disparity study, because it's unlike just another study. You're absolutely right. I agree wholeheartedly. One thing we don't need is another study for a study. But federal funds, and when funds begin to hit our state, and they will, before we can assess goals on those federal contracts, the disparity study will defend it. Because what will happen, you may have a silent arm, and if you assess or stipulate a goal in a contract, and if you don't have the anecdotal data or the disparity study to defend it, what they're going to do, and we've seen it across the country, organizations and individual companies such as the Western states, I would encourage you to go visit the Western State Challenge, where a contractor sued the state because they did not have a proper disparity study and they required minority participation in a state of Washington contract. And what happened was they took it to court, and the federal courts deemed that their DBE program was not being applied properly. So they canceled their DBE program for 3 years, and they had to wait until they did a disparity study for the program to come back. And we cannot have that happen on our watch. So that's the only reason why a disparity study, when we know that disparities exist, we're going to advocate for goals to be on the contract, we must have a disparity study to defend it.
All right, that's Joe Jackson with the USDOT. We're also joined by Senator Gerald Malloy, District 29, Chesterfield, Darlington, Lee, and Marlborough counties. Dr. Dolores DaCosta, Executive Director with the South Carolina Commission for Minority Affairs, and Frank Knapp, President and CEO of the South Carolina Small Business Chamber of Commerce. I'm Trey Taylor, and you're watching the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus Minority Business Forecast. Senator Malloy, I'd like to ask you next, there's a bill working through the General Assembly on broadband, and recently the Charleston port. What could this mean for minority business? I want to ask you and then go to you, Mr. Knapp, and then you, Mr. Jackson.
I think that any matter that we have as it relates to business, and when the state is trying to work on the infrastructure, is of a benefit to any viable business. The issue with the ports bill is probably a bill of greater significance because of the fact there's $550 million in GO bonds, and basically, if you look at it, it's a small amount as it relates to our capacity, but it's still a tremendous amount as it relates to the request. The request had come in a pretty quick fashion. Does it assist in minority business? I think that obviously that it does, but to what detriment? I think that whenever you're talking about putting some money like that into that area, how is it going to affect the housing, the living of those folks that are around the areas of the port, and then how much does it impact the rest of the state of South Carolina? I think that what we have is, I think there's going to be a continuing debate on that issue, because what the port does is that they make the claim that it affects 10% of the jobs in the state of South Carolina. But where does that 10% go? I mean, we know that there's heavily substantiated in Greenville, maybe some of the other areas, but the rural areas don't have the manufacturing and those kind of things that go along with it, except for maybe Dillon. Broadband is one that is one that we have to end up having. I think that what as we continue to see the world after the pandemic, we won't see it the same way that we saw it beforehand. You're going to have access to each other through and by the internet. I mean, we're challenged in rural areas. We see how we're able to attribute the funds that we have in this last package. It's something that Congressman Claflin has worked on a lot. And so in the end, the real challenges have been those that are in the storefront businesses are going to be challenged a bit, even in rural areas. People that have areas that where they're used to doing business in a certain way, it's going to be a change. And so we got to end up making sure that broadband is as great as it can for the upload and the download, so you can make sure that you can end up having access to one another. I think that the issue on the port is an issue that really is going to require some study and work. I think other issues that, hate crimes legislation, a lot of things is going to end up promoting business. We're going to see how different companies will weigh in to end up helping minority-owned businesses in this climate. So I think there's a lot of things. Everything that we do has an impact upon minority businesses and rural businesses, as we were talking, and women. We got to decide how we end up handling these grant funds and loan programs. And so this is a time whenever money is cheap. We hope that it stays the same. I think that what we got to do now is learn what is happening in this last stimulus package to see what effect it has on the revenue with the unemployment fund, that the money that is coming in, where it is extended. how it shapes the revenue going forward. And we're still waiting on the revenue to end up coming in, the estimates, projections that we have for the budget for this coming year. We don't expect a huge change, but the thing is, I think we have to end up studying it very, very carefully. So with the help of this panel, I think that some good information from Dr. DaCosta and from Mr. Knapp as it relates to the small businesses and what happens. We saw exactly what Dr. DaCosta had seen. Folks were not able to navigate the PPP program. They had a lot of people that were not having access to banks. There were a lot of folks that got the PPP money that you can challenge as to whether it was actually needed. Was it the intended result for it? And when we first started working on getting the money for the minority businesses, it's only $2,000 to $25,000, and the applications were abundant. The money was not sufficient. And obviously, we just have to work and continue to end up doing more. But also, my last point is that we have to be ready to receive. And so when you are making a request for funds, you got to be able to receive it. And obviously, government works best whenever we are ready to end up having all of our apparatus in place.
Thank you, Senator Malloy. Before I go to Mr. Knapp and then to you, Mr. Jackson, I want to ask a follow-up question, please, Senator Malloy. Are there opportunities associated with this? Is there the need for a school bond bill to build new facilities? What could this mean for Black and minority business?
So I think that it means a lot for businesses if it happens, but the challenge is that it's more of a political question as more so than a need question. It's more of a political question. And I think that what happens is that money is cheap, the ratings of the state is good, and the question is that do we have political will to make certain that we make an investment into education? And I think that right now we're challenged in that aspect. I mean, what the General Assembly has demonstrated that they're more apt to end up passing a bill for GO bonds for the port and to end up leaving their revenue bonds in place than they end up doing something for education. And so that is a real challenge. And I think that what happens with that is that simply put, elections matter. They have consequences. We can make the request for it. It is a challenging proposition. In my humble opinion, I just don't see it happening.
Right. Thank you, Senator Malloy. I know we are right at the time we're supposed to wrap up the panel, but I do want to ask you, Mr. Knapp, and then you, Mr. Jackson, the same question. The need for both broadband ports and building schools and the opportunities for Black, minority, and small business. Mr. Knapp, and then you, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you. Look, for everybody who's listening or watching, if we can be of assistance in promoting broadband, affordable broadband statewide, that is one of our priorities this year. Please contact me. We'd love to work with you. Look, if we don't have broadband in our rural areas, we can't expect them to grow. That is a basic infrastructure needed. And so I'm very pleased that the state's put a little bit of money in. It's never enough. Congressman Clyburn has his $94 billion introduction of broadband for the underserved and communities. That bill is going to be also offered in the Senate by Amy Klobuchar. The word is that it looks like it probably can go through. Which will be a major hit, but we just got to make sure we manage this properly and have somebody in charge of figuring out where the broadband needs to go and making sure it gets there. So that is important. We just simply have to understand that we've been talking about building out, let's say, the I-95 corridor economically for how many decades and decades and decades, and we've not done it. We've not done it for a number of reasons. One is infrastructure, and the other is capital, getting capital to those rural communities to start businesses. So we can't rely on the banks to do this. Banks, there's 68% fewer banks today than there was in 2008. So banks are shrinking, consolidating. They don't want to make small loans. We need to have the federal government step up, and we have a proposal out there called Reform the SBA. It's online, and you can see what we talk about access to capital and making sure we can start getting direct money infused into these rural communities and to really get them going. And one last thing I want to say, and just to Dr. Caucus' comment, I just want to make sure that nobody hears her words of what she says about the needs of the minority community and the PPP money and this, and take it out of context and think that she's blaming those minority entrepreneurs. They a lot of them are coming in from maybe rural areas. They don't have the maybe sophistication. Maybe they don't have the education. Maybe they don't have a lot of the things that folks that look like me have. And so it doesn't mean they don't want to have it. It's just that we've not done a good job of helping them get where they need to go with their knowledge and their technical expertise. And we need to do that. I'm glad to hear that the small business development centers and the women's business centers all want to try to figure this out. But we've got to do that, and we've got to get it out to the rural communities, not make people come to Columbia to get it. Thank you very much. Appreciate being on the panel.
Thank you, Mr. Knapp. Mr. Jackson, of the port and broadband, those bills moving through the General Assembly, will there be opportunities for small minority and Black-owned businesses?
Great. Well, once again, similar to Dr. Sellers, I want to say thank you very much for having me, and I've enjoyed serving on the panel with everyone. And also on behalf of the USDOT Mid-South Atlantic region, I will definitely have my team reach out to everyone, because we have resources available within the DOT, and we've partnered with the City of Columbia, the airport, and various others in years past, the SBA. So we look forward to partnering with you, sharing with you the opportunities that exist. I started this business almost 25 years ago, and I started because someone said something that was exciting when I started in this industry. And you shared with me that at the beginning, the turn of the century, that there are going to be three industries that are so important. It's going to be the transportation of messaging, communication, the transportation of money, e-commerce, and of course, the transportation of people. And of course, I have not been able to get out of this industry for almost 25 years because it's so robust. Mm-hmm. So, broadband, transportation, access, it's important. Messaging, moving of people. So as it's moving through the House bill, and as these contracts are being identified or planned, several things I partner with entities all the time is we administer a socioeconomic impact. So what does the broadband opportunity mean to the homeowners who may be displaced, to the jobs that may be displaced? But on the positive note, what does it mean by the indirect and direct multiplier of opportunities that may exist? So this is a great time while they're planning for this great opportunity, once again, to identify the opportunities where they exist for small and minority-owned businesses, because if it's not stipulated during the planning process, it will not be realized and obtained during the implementation process. So we have best practices to share on socioeconomic impact studies. I would be more to reach out to anyone and share the template, because so often when the federal government spends a lot of money within our regions, we have 12 centers throughout the United States, and we're normally called, and the question that's normally asked, we're about to spend and send federal dollars to this state. Based on their DBE program, can you help and assure us that the money will be used wisely and the DBEs will have an opportunity? And this is why we partner with our different partners to make sure that once federal dollars hit, it's a reality to the small businesses. And to Dr. Caucus' point, and to Mr. Knapp, thank you very much for what you said, because you're right, with the PPP and a lot of programs, the one thing that small businesses are dealing with, especially African-Americans businesses, where the median business gross revenue is $1 million. That's a whole lot of business based on the contracts I see. However, $1 million to a small business is a lifeline, and it means a lot. So not only do we have to help them to obtain that opportunity, but they always struggle with the sustaining. So there's one thing to have a contract today, but if we don't write minority participation in contracts and enforce it and make sure that it's sustainable, unfortunately, there's no way a business can make a wise business decision to constantly go after that segment. Because if there is no support for them, they can take their $1 million and go private sector and go other areas and make a great living. So I would encourage everyone to make sure that they continue to advocate to make sure that minority participation is stipulated in contracts. Georgia and South Carolina, with the buying power that came out in 2019 for African-American businesses, ranked within the top 10 African-American with the highest percentage of buying powers for African-Americans. With the previous 2009 economic downturn that we came out of, African-American buying power has increased to $1.4 trillion. That's huge. So we need to continue to advocate and support business because we are a great consumer. For the money that's coming out, we're going to spend the money, but we need to support our businesses so therefore we can become producers and manufacturers. So with that said and done, we're here to support. You have my information. Please reach out to Devin and get my information. We'll be more than happy to share best practices, and thank you very much for having me.
Joe Jackson, USDOT Mid-South Atlantic Region, also Senator Gerald Malloy, District 29, Chesterfield, Darlington, Lee, and Marlborough counties. Dr. Dolores DaCosta, Executive Director for the South Carolina Commission for Minority Affairs, and Frank Knapp, President and CEO of South Carolina Small Business Chamber of Commerce. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Thank you for your incredible information and advice and resources and your knowledge and expertise that you shared to the viewers today. Thank you again. I'm Trey Taylor. On behalf of the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus, we thank you again so much for joining us today. Coming up, more information in the close. Want you to continue to post and share this information out past today so that we can continue to get the information to the folks that need it. Again, I'm Trey Taylor. I invite you to join me weekdays at 2 o'clock for Coping with COVID, updates on the pandemic and information to help you thrive and survive COVID-19. It airs on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, weekdays at 2 o'clock. Until then, again, on behalf of Chair Patricia Hennigan and the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus, thank you so much for joining us for the Minority Business Forecast.
Hello again, 2021 Minority Business Forecast participants. We hope that you enjoyed this event and were able to take some useful information back to your business and community. Remember that the members of the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus are always here to assist you, and you can contact us anytime. I suggest the caucus host this event because I believe we must do more to help our Black and minority communities, and you can set the date that the Minority Business Forecast will be back next year. I thank you again for participating. God bless you, your business, your families, our great state, and our great country. Until the next time, goodbye. Goodbye.
Thank you for joining us for the 2021 South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus Minority Business Forecast. Continue to tag, post, and share this informative session. And please continue to comment. Your questions will be reviewed and addressed at a later date. For more information on today's Minority Business Forecast or the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus, contact Devin Owens at dowens.sclbc@gmail.com. Please like and follow the caucus on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And be the first to know about upcoming events, conferences, and the updated version of today's Minority Business Forecast featuring additional content, information, resources, and answers to your questions. On behalf of Madam Chair Representative Patricia Hennigan and the entire SCLBC, thank you again. God bless. And remember, Black business, women business, minority business, your business matters to the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus.